Hi guys, and welcome to the Fights Out Boxing podcast, which is going to be a special review guided tour of the year. And because I'm doing a guided tour, I have a guest with me, Iggy of the Fight Site, who you definitely know of his TENGRIDOME podcast, which I've mispronounced again.
That's basically just a running gag at this point, so whatever.
Yeah, and he's he follows the boxing, but he's been more on the MMA side this year. So I am giving him and you a guided tour to things that happened in boxing this year. Iggy, did you watch much boxing this year at all?
Oh Jesus! Let me think. I did, for a fact, know that I watched Usyk versus Joshua 2 because we actually recorded breakdowns on that one, and alternate commentary as well. But I don't think I've watched anything else. I may have caught a fight here and there, but then just kind of.
Did you watch Opataya versus Breedis? Because I know we talked about that online. I'm going to get into it later, but we talked about that.
Did we?
Yeah, in Discord. In Discord, we talked about it. It's the one where Opataya got his jaw broken on both sides.
Oh Jesus!
And then still won.
I may have, but
yeah.
But I've completely forgot what happened in that one.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, we'll get into that in the relevant place. So basically, the plan is I'm going to take it, roughly chronologically. I'm going to jump about a bit because if I mention a fighter in March and then he fights again in September, it's going to be a bit silly to be asking you to keep an index of what we talked about. So I'll jump about a bit, but it's basically I'm going to go, January, February. This happened, and like I say, I'm going to link you to occasionally a couple of knockouts that happened. See how that works.
Sure.
Which I think we may need to do something, dropping it in the description of the podcast. But if not, you lads can find them. The listeners can find them if you need to.
Yeah.
Because there were some pretty good knockouts. It was a fun year for boxing. I should open with that. It was a very busy year for boxing. Like, I had no time for MMA because I was just covering the boxing the whole time.
I wish I'd done that instead, because I tried doing a guided tour for the year in MMA with Sriram, Ed, and Fenyu, and Fenyu was on board, but Ed and Sriram, because they care less about the actual day-to-day goings on of the sport. They were like, come on, the year was bad.
Yeah.
And so they started, derailing the episode until we basically guilt-tripped us into having a discussion about a completely different topic as a result.
Well, I mean, that always seems to happen, right? But everyone I know who follows MMA properly is like, no, it wasn't a great year. It was bad. Which is a bit depressing, but yeah. Anyway, okay, let's get started. Because January, nothing ever happens in January, and that more or less true this year, because the only thing in my notes was Ilunga Makabu versus Makunu, which no one saw because it was promoted by Don King, and that ended up being a robbery, but no one cried robbery because no one saw it, and but Makabu technically won, even though he lost, in real life, but he won on the cards. But he performed so badly that any hope of him getting the Canelo fight just went out the window. So January started slow. So we're going to move straight on to February, and the first fighter that I got really hyped about was Jesse Rodriguez. Bam Rodriguez. I don't know if you followed the story at all. Familiarity? Did you notice any of my ravings?
If it was February, I was probably too preoccupied, actually, fleeing the country, because that's the month when Russia invaded.
Yeah. You had other things on your mind. Yeah, he started in February. He fought 3 times this year. He fought Carlos Cuadras on 2 weeks' notice. He jumped up basically a division and a half on 2 weeks' notice to fight Carlos Cuadras at super flyweight, so Shark Tank division. And Cuadras has been in with everyone in that division. He's been in with Trisika Turungvasai, and he gave Chocolatito a really tough fight, and he lost to Estrada quite narrowly, and Jesse Rodriguez jumped up 2 weights to fight him and just absolutely schooled him. It's completely dominated. Anyone who hasn't seen Bam Rodriguez and likes people like Vasily Lomachenko or old school Orlando Canizales, the kind of footworky type magicians. You have to see these performances because we've my podcast straight after the thing was like, we've got a new star, it's fantastic. It was great.
So it was basically like a coming out party.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, so he's definitely the breakthrough fighter of the year. But before these fights, everyone was like, yeah, he's I'd heard of him. I hadn't seen. I think I'd even seen him fight, but I didn't remember anything. And then he had these fights, and it was he's now a champion at he was at Superfly. He's moved back down, so that his brother can try to win belts at Superfly. But yeah, he dominated Cuadras, and then he absolutely schooled Sirsuke Sorungvasar as well. Just completely humiliated him, basically. Which just doesn't happen. Right? so people can say like Sorungvasar, he's old and but he's been out for ages and he's past his best, and that's true to some extent. But even still, just a little.
SSR is one of those guys that get old, but they don't get old. He's, as far as athletes go, I think Sorungvasar has actually aged quite gracefully.
Yeah, and I think just the way that Rodriguez beat him was using his own strengths against him, which is when he goes to bull rush and his timing is usually so good that even the best fighters are like, oh shit, you're coming at me now. But Rodriguez just completely took that away from him, just with foot feints and shit. And it was lovely. I'm not going to break down in depth every performance here because I did that already during the year. but yeah, it was. If you haven't seen any of his fights, I would recommend all three of his fights. He fought Israel Gonzalez, dropped down a weight and fought Israel Gonzalez. That wasn't as pretty. But it was also good to see because Gonzalez, basically, he's not as good as the other two guys, but he prepared really well. And by that stage, the word's gone out. Bam Rodriguez is really good at these little circling footwork things. So he had to do something else. That he basically toughed it out and fought in the pocket and got a little bit dirty when he needed to. And some people got disappointed as like, we didn't see the magical stuff. And so yeah, but that's going to happen sometimes, right? So yeah, that was my first real. Really, the real thing that got me really hyped for boxing for the year. Jesse Rodriguez. And then we finally saw the rivalry come to fruition. Kell Brook fought Amir Khan. 5 years too late. So the British Pacquiao versus Mayweather, right?
Oh my god.
And what happened is Kell Brook beat Amir Khan up, just completely beat the shit out of him. I mean, the thing about Kell Brook is he's got so many things wrong with him, but his timing's fantastic, and it hadn't gone enough just then for Amir Khan to leap his way past. I'm sure. I assume you're familiar with both fighters to some extent.
I mean, basically, like Amir Khan's whole thing is that the mimetic thing. If you catch him, Amir Khan goes down. And I presume he's slowed down. He has slowed down enough for Kell Brook to finally, to have that edge with the timing. Yeah, to have a bigger edge with the timing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thing for me was it was always tricky because I would always have picked Kell Brook because his timing's always been so good. Even Terence Crawford, he beat the shit out of him, but it took him a few rounds to figure out the timing, and Brook caught him a few times. Amir Khan was never going to be able to avoid him. It just wasn't going to happen. So yeah, it's a bit of a shit kicking. There's not much to say other than that. Everyone who doesn't like Amir Khan, which is apparently most people, celebrated. But yeah, it was the end of two careers, I think, because neither one of them is going to fight again. As far as I know.
The first fight I watched with Kell Brook, featuring Kell Brook, was the Golovkin beating, and so even after that one, I was like, oh my god, what's he going to do next?
Yeah, he's had the biggest waste of career because he was a welterweight for ages. I remember he fought Sean Porter and then he didn't kind of fight anyone for ages, just kind of circling, and then he jumped up 2 divisions to fight Kell Brook. He was supposed to fight someone else. I can't remember who it was. but there was a financial crash. This was the stupidest thing. There was a financial crash or something, and his opponent pulled out of the fight because his guarantee had been paid in pounds. Oh, it was Brexit. Brexit crashed the fight because his guarantee had been in pounds and not dollars.
Oh my god!
And after Brexit, the pound crashed, and his opponent's guarantee came down. So he said, "No,
Jesus Christ,
I'm not having it." The stupidest thing I've ever heard of. So he fought Golovkin and got beaten up, and then he fought Errol Spence and got beaten up. But now he's got his validation as the best fighter in Britain from that era, which is almost definitely not true. But anyway, and on the same day, we also saw another chinny, leapy, hand speed fighter get fucked up because poor old Jorge Linares got knocked out. I think he got knocked out by Abdualev. It's not a significant fight, but it's just worth mentioning because Linares is kind of like the American answer. No, he's not American. He's Venezuelan answer to Amir Khan, really. So it's a nice little.
I mean, there's also the knockdown against Lomachenko, which is why casuals mostly remember him, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's been such a frustrating fighter because he's quite similar to Khan. He's got these really flashy things, and occasionally he gets in with someone really good and looks quite good.
Yeah,
and then he'll get in with someone like 3 levels below and absolutely shit. And he's also got paper skin. Like he'll get cut if you blow on him. It's fucking ridiculous. So his career ended in he lost that fight, and then he had another 2 fights left in his contract with a Russian promoter. So he's doing a sad trombone ending. I was just looking before this episode, and I saw that he fought in December and lost to some random, I think it was a Lithuanian in Russia. So, so that's an ignominious end to a career. But yeah,
I mean that's how most fighters end up. Sadly, it's just kind of what happens.
Yeah, they're just going on too long. Yeah. Then I'm going to move on. We're still in February. There's Josh Taylor versus Jack Catterall, which was a unification fight. No, it wasn't even a unification. Taylor had all the belts already, and he was fighting Jack Catterall. He's a British level fighter, and going into it, this is one I got badly wrong, because Jack Catterall was sort of a British level fighter, and he's quite good, but Josh Taylor should have been, in my opinion, levels above him. And then Catterall just kind of won, except the judges didn't see it that way, and it was the most controversial decision of the year. But yeah, it was a really weird performance because Josh Taylor just didn't do any of the things that he's good at, and some of it was Jack Catterall, doing pretty cool things like drawing him on and countering him. But it was disappointing because I don't know if you pay attention to me and Taylor on Twitter, we shout out Lee Wiley a lot. He's an analyst. He's a video analyst who does these really cool videos. But now he works.
I watched quite a bit of Lee Wiley. Yeah.
Okay, well, fair enough. He works as a coach now with Ben Davison. So he was one of Josh Taylor's coaches for this fight, and it was like the things he's doing wrong are things that I know Lee Wiley knows, and I don't. Is it a communication problem or is he just? Well, they tried to change him into a different fighter and just hadn't finished. It was really weird. He's now left that camp, Josh Taylor. So
we'll never find out.
Yeah, because I mean, I like that team. Like people give Ben Davison shit because he's an arsehole, but he's so like, he has to put himself into every conversation about boxing
isn't
all the
Josh
time.
Taylor
constantly.
the anti-vax guy, or am I thinking of someone
Yeah,
else?
anti-vax and a bit of a racist, and I think the anti-vax you might be thinking of. I can't remember his name now. English guy.
I mean, of course, he's English.
Yeah, well, Josh Taylor's Scottish in it, but Josh Taylor's he's that kind of crowd. He retweets anti-Islamic, anti-Muslim, politicians and shit like that. So he's a dickhead, and he's been arrested for beating someone up and calling him gay slurs and things like that. So he's not a nice guy, but and the other thing, the other sort of notable thing that's come out of that fight is there's a new promoter in England. He's taken over Eddie Hearn's contract at Sky, He's called Ben Shalom, and the promoter's called Boxer. And the thing is you can tell he's got a lot to learn, because say what you want about Eddie Hearn, but if you gave him a robbery like that, like a big event robbery like that, he would have made it. It happened in February. The rematch would have been in a big stadium in Scotland. Massive event.
I mean,
for all the belts, for everything.
Eddie Hearn would have, stirred up a shitstorm about that if it had happened to
Exactly. And what's happened with the fight instead is Josh Taylor kind of went, I might move up, I might not move up, I might move up to to welterweight, because this was 140. I might move up. It was the weight cut, and he dropped like 3 belts, and he went, I'm not moving up.
Jesus.
I'll fight Jack Catterall for the 1 belt I've got left. But they still haven't fought. They were going to fight at the end of February.
What did...
But they decided it was too close to Chris Eubank's fight with, I can't even remember who it is now, Williams, I think, and one of the Smiths. In any case, it's too close to that, so they're moving it to March. And it's like, come on. You could have made both of these guys stars.
That's like, that's a crazy back fumble. I mean, come on. You've had it. You've had the unexpected decision, you've had the guy overperforming, you've had the star kind of the more well-regarded fighter underperforming, and so there's the narrative right there. You can spin it into anything you want.
Yep, no, it was a mad. Yeah, it's just terrible promoting. He's done quite well. Like Sky throwing money at fighters, but he has to learn that. Like, you can look back in history and see what Eddie Hearn did with Carl Froch versus George Groves. It was like exactly the same situation, and he made both of them stars. And Froch's record for attendance didn't get beaten until this year. I know Anthony Joshua did, but there is a new record for attendance in post-war boxing in Europe. I don't know if you saw this. I'm skipping ahead a bit.
I mean, Carl Froch cannot shut up about beating George Groves in front of like half of all the people in Europe at the Wembley Stadium. So can't exactly.
No, he's but no. This I'm going to skip a bit, but just in April, Tyson Fury fought Dillian Whyte, and that is the second biggest live crowd in the world since World War II. For fucking Dillian Whyte.
I mean, we can snark about it, but like, truth be told, that's what promoting should be like. You actually promote the fights, so everyone makes money. Yeah,
and Tyson Fury, he knows what he's doing promotionally. So does Dillian Whyte. Actually, Dillian Whyte is one of the most successful managers in Britain at the moment. Fucking ridiculous. He's found two completely unknown heavyweights and made them both stars. Alan Babich and Fabio Wardley. So, what can you do? Anyway, and yeah, the fight for the week that Taylor Catterall happened, going back to the plan, that was a bit crazy because you also had 2 other ridiculous upsets that actually got called, but there was one guy, German Ancajas. He's a Superfly. He's sort of the other super flyweight champion, and no one talks about him because he never fights anyone. He's kind of been holding the belt hostage for like 10 years.
No,
let me see, not 10 years, but 5 years, a good 5 years since 2016. He won the belt, and he's basically fought no one of note since then. And he pulled out this random Argentinian, Fernando Martinez, just completely out of nowhere, 31-year-old Argentinian who's never fought outside of Argentina. And Martinez fucked him up. so that was fun. And then they had a rematch in like September, October, and Cajas was basically like, oh yeah, I just didn't cut weight properly. I wasn't taking the fight seriously, so this time I'm definitely going to win. So they got back in the ring, and Martinez fucked him up again. So that was satisfying. It was just exactly the same fight. It was a brutal one. If you like a bit of an action war, then Martinez versus Cajas, both of them. You're not necessarily going to watch the whole both fights end to end, but
I mean, you can watch either one of them. I mean, it's still going to be
basically. I'd say watch the second one. It's more relevant
Okay, sure.
because it's the more recent one. But yeah, that was enjoyable. And then there was an American prospect. One of those really flashy prospects with the pink hair and the gladiator shorts. Chris Colbert, and he got beaten up by Hector Luis Garcia, who was another. I can't remember what nation he hails from, but it was another. Central America.
So the guy with the gladiator shorts got beaten up. Good.
Got beaten up. Yeah.
Those shorts are awful. I hate them. I hate that trend. Anyone who puts on the gladiator shorts should be beaten up. That's my conviction.
Yeah, you're going to have to deal with them because Jerome Ennis is going to be. He should be a big star next year.
I mean, I like Ennis.
He wears them a lot.
I recognize his skills. I recognize that he's a promising fighter. Could be someone elite, but those shorts, man, Jesus.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but yeah. Well, then, in that case, you may enjoy Chris Colbert getting just completely melting. Like, he's supposed to be this cool outboxer, and he just completely melted under pressure, and had no ideas. My podcast was I was actually angry at him for how badly he didn't have a plan B. It was a bit of a running theme for me this year. Like, it was just like week after week, especially after the start of the year. It was like this happened and then this happened, and then one fighter or another just didn't have a second plan. They had this first thing that they're good at, and then they didn't have a backup plan. It's so fucking irritating.
I mean, it's boxing.
Yeah, it was.
Boxing, if anything, has the biggest history of like fighters having plan Bs and like having planned for every occasion, every round. So that's kind of like just like MMA. It's MMA's whole thing to not have plans. Like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I was happy to see, when I said Bam Rodriguez had a slightly trickier fight later on in the year. I was happy to see it because I could see that he did have a plan B, because I've just been getting so frustrated throughout the year of seeing, supposedly good fighters just completely not have a second idea. And yeah, the other thing that happened in that week is I am now going to drop something in the Discord for you, was Jordan Gill. He's a British level lad. Like, he's kind of like Kell Brook, but much chinier. And he was fighting Karim Guerfi, who's the European champion. And I'm just giving a bit of the backstory before you watch this, because he basically, Jordan Gill, he'd had his eardrum burst. He'd been knocked down. He'd been DDT'd because Guerfi grabbed hold of him and fell over backwards and knocked Jordan Gill silly. And he'd hurt his knee, so he couldn't walk, he couldn't move, and he just retreated into his corner for like 5 rounds. And it was a fantastic corner performance, I have to say, by Dave Caldwell. He just said, stand above me, like, don't go anywhere, stand above me, because you can't walk. If you walk, the referee's going to call the fight off. Stand above me, stay there and listen to what I say. And he did that for like 5 rounds. And and I think towards the end of I think it was the 8th, I'm going to drop it in the thing now, and at the end of the 8th, when almost definitely would have been stopped at the end of this round, this happened. What I've just dropped into the thing.
Okay, so he stood there for the entire 5 rounds after getting badly hurt.
Just basically didn't walk out of his corner and made Guerfi come to him. Like,
why did Guerfi not make Jordan Gill move out the corner?
I don't know. I think he just lost his head a bit himself. Like, he's not a world level fighter, but he's quite good. But he just kind of lost his head and thought, "Oh yeah, I've got the pressure on."
I mean, yeah, that will go into the greatest corner performances compilation, I guess, or greatest comebacks or anything.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost definitely going to be my knockout of the year, just because of there've been some good knockouts this year, but that just ridiculous.
I mean, the context just is what makes it.
Yeah. If you watch, if you've still got it up, watch afterwards as Jordan Gill walks off, and he literally can't walk. He falls over.
Yeah. He's using the ropes to prop himself up.
Yeah. Yeah, and like Eddie Hearn's like, yeah, oh shit, get him help, get medical attention.
Was Guerfi okay after this? Like, did he get?
He was down for quite a while, but he's fought since, and he got knocked out again by Michael Conlan like 3 weeks ago. Okay, so that didn't go great for him. But he did. He was okay. Yeah, I mean, he's been back fighting and all of that. So
okay.
So yeah. So
I mean,
that was
obviously
fun.
it's
That
not
was
okay
lots of,
that he got knocked out, but what are you going to do?
yeah, it's a spot. You know, in boxing you kind of have to live with it. And yeah, Jordan Gill went on to fight Kiko Martinez, and he got beaten up as well. Like, he's just got no chin. He's got not really good defense and no chin. But I enjoy watching him, but he's not very good. Then okay, we're moving on. We're still only in March. Chocolatito for Julio Cesar Martinez, who is like a really irritating, fun to watch, but very irritating Mexican fighter. And he got completely and utterly schooled by Chocolatito. That was it, just a masterclass performance. You know, one of those where just reminded you how good Chocolatito is. So if you haven't seen that one, you know, at some point find the time, because it's just one of those masterclass performances against someone who's quite good. But it just kind of showed the idea of having variations of pacing, like timing, because Martinez is quite good, but he always fights at 100%, like full. He's really explosive and really powerful, and he always goes 100%. And Chocolatito beat him by basically not going 100% all the time, and knowing where everything was going to come.
Yeah, it's basically just Chocolatito being patient, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Taking his time.
Yeah, and there wasn't, you know, there's not too much to, you know, like I say, I could break down the performance, but I've already done that, so I'm not gonna I'm not gonna do it to go into it too much. But
I mean, they can just watch it and then they'll figure it out.
Like anyone who hasn't seen it, that is one of the fights I would say you should watch from this year, like one of the ones that you really should catch up on, because it was it wasn't a fantastic fight in a fight of the year sense, because it was too one-sided, but it was one of those really cool performances. And I think it was the same card. Another knockout that I've dropped into the chat for you. This doesn't need much setup. It was just a very silly, sloppy fight. But the knockout was spectacular. So have a look.
Oh, fucking hell. It just gets folded.
Folds in half, yeah. And Lara, like the commentary mentioned, Lara had been sort of wobbling just before, but like Lara punches.
But you say the fight was comical prior to this one. Prior to the
knockout.
Knockout.
It was just because they're both really sloppy fighters. Like Lara is, he hits ridiculously hard for he is a featherweight.
I'd assume the problem is that he knows he hits ridiculously hard and tries to lean into it.
Yeah, that's basically his whole thing, is just winging really hard shots as hard as he possibly can at his opponents. And he got robbed against Josh Warrington. No, he beat Josh Warrington doing that, and then he had a clash of heads. So he's found it quite hard to get, you know, other opponents in. but Sanchez is basically the same, but not quite as good. So they're just standing there swinging big shots at each other. It was a very silly fight. There's only a couple of rounds, so I enjoyed it. And yeah, not too much to say about that. Like Lara, everyone wants Lara to fight, you know, the other fighters at featherweight, but none of them really want to get in the ring with him because he hits really fucking hard.
Yeah.
But we'll see how that goes. The other thing that happened in March was probably most people's contender for fight of the year was Mickey Conlon versus Lee Wood, which was another Ben Davison special, because Conlon, this is a fight I got hilariously wrong. I mean, I said in my podcast afterwards, I'm glad I didn't have time to preview it, because I would have been embarrassingly wrong about it. Because basically, Conlon, I don't know, are you familiar with Conlon like before? You remember the photo of him from the Olympics? He's the guy who gave the middle finger to the judges after getting robbed.
Oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah, so he's got a bit of a following, but as a pro, his style has basically been, you know, jab and move, jab and move, jab and move, jab and move. And you know, my prediction was going to be that that's what he's going to do, and he's going to beat Lee Wood, who's a bit slow of foot. But what actually happened is Conlon decided, okay, this time I'm going to engage. And the first time of the fight, he was winning like really comfortably. And then Lee Wood just started making little adjustments, and he was getting good advice from his corner, and just started making little adjustments. And the thing about Conlon is, when you get him into the pocket, he kind of it's always like the first two things he does are good, and then the third thing he does is really stupid, and he gets really out of position.
Hasn't really got the depth in the pocket, is what you're saying.
Yeah, basically. And as the fight went on, Wood started getting further and he started winning the rounds, but he probably still needed a knockout. As a fight, he needed knockdowns or knockouts to be sure of the win. So I think it was the 10th round. You'll see in a second. He did this. I've just dropped the same fight in again. Hold on. let me copy the actual link I wanted to drop on you. Very clever this morning. There we go. That should be it. Yeah, he did this.
Nope. Region locked.
Oh, fuck's sake! Come on. Right. Well, what he did was he knocked Michael Conlan literally out of the ring.
Oh, I think I saw that. Yeah,
you might have seen it. He fell down. I think he got caught. Yeah. I mean, that was a bit concerning in the time as well. I laugh about it now, but Conlan was down for quite a while.
Yeah, I was browsing Twitter the other at the time when it happened, and I saw that both guys falling out, or Conlan falling out at least.
Yeah. But yeah, Conlan has made a good recovery, and he beat up Karen Guerfi about 2 weeks ago, so he's fine. But it was a really good fight actually. It's just and it's reasonably skilled. It's not like elite level, but they're both just about world level fighters. You could say European British level above that. So I can't call Conlan British because he was born in Belfast, but he's Irish. So
I mean, he's aggressively Irish, given what I know.
Very, very Irish. Yeah. But that was really good fight, and anyone who hasn't seen it, if you have the time, it is worth catching up. Even if neither of these guys is going to trouble the top of the division again. Lee Wood is still a champion, so he will trouble the top of the division again, but he isn't going to, he's not going to be relevant forever, if you know what I mean. But the British, there's loads of really good British fighters at featherweight, but they're all different promoters, so it's kind of like, are you going to fight each other?
Yeah, probably not.
But hopefully. There's one guy, Nick Ball, who I have in my notes somewhere, but I'll mention him now because he's at featherweight, so he's relevant. But he's 5 foot. He claims to be 5'5" now, but originally he claimed his listing was 5'2", and that's much more plausible because all of his fights involve him basically just punching straight upwards.
So he's 5'5", the same way that Michael Chandler is 5'8". Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically. But he's just so fun to watch. He's clearly been taking notes from Mike Tyson. I'm not saying he's as good as Mike Tyson, but he basically uses being tiny to come in under his opponents and then just leap up into punches. And he's not at world level yet. I think he'll get there. He's one to look out for next year if he can get the fights that he wants. But he's also the most aggressively. He's dirty sometimes. One of his knockouts this year involved him. He hit his opponent so hard he span around, and was sort of leaning headfirst against the ropes. And the referee didn't stop it, so Ball just sort of stood there and waited for him to turn around, and then clocked him as he turned, and got the knockout. So he's he will stay within the rules, but as close to the edge of the rules as possible.
Grey areas. I like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that type of.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if the referee isn't paying attention, might as well.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, he's the kind of fighter that Ryan would fucking hate because there's nothing clean about his form or the way he fights, but he's just really, enjoyable, aggressive, and fun. And at the moment, he's British level, but I hope to see him at world level. He's just fun, I am a little bit biased towards the British side because that's just I watch more of those fights than everywhere else. But all right, I'm moving on to April now. How long have we been talking? Quite a while.
It's all right.
It's
the year in review. These always take a long time.
Yeah, that's fair. Golovkin versus Murata, which was.
Golovkin is old. He's old.
Exactly. That's exactly. People were telling me, I was having arguments about this at the time, and people were like, "Yeah, he won in the end. What do you want? He warmed up and he got to the fight and he won."
It took him half the fight to warm up, first of all, and then when he got warmed up, he didn't look like It wasn't like he had to step on the gas in order to get the finish. It was still as slow as he started out. It's just that Morata also got beaten up a little bit and slowed down.
Yeah. It's just Morata game planned badly and gassed in the first 3 rounds. That's really what happened.
Yeah. I mean, it was a good gutsy performance from both. Golovkin showed that he can still, move around and box and kind of like tough things out when he actually needs to tough things out. But he's not gonna tough things out against. He wasn't gonna tough things out against Alvarez the third time around.
No,
come on.
No, and even though that fight ended up, it ended up closer than I expected, just because Canelo was so. It was such a weird year for the sort of Asian big names. Because what the fuck happened to Canelo? We'll get onto him in a second, but basically I came out of the Golovkin Morata fight going, he's not going to beat Canelo. It's a pointless fight. I don't know why it's happening.
Yeah.
And that proved right. But on the same day, I think it was the same day, we had Sebastian Fundora versus Erickson Lubin. And Fundora basically became one of my favourite fighters this year. I don't know. Are you familiar with him?
I don't think so. No.
He's the 6'5" junior middleweight. So he's built like a stick. And I've never seen a fighter who looks less like what he fights like.
So he doesn't lean on being a stick. Essentially, is what you're saying.
No, he's a. What he actually is an infighting tank.
Oh, that's great.
Makes no fucking sense. I mean, I love it.
More stick-shaped people need to actually do that because the reach gives you an enormous advantage when you actually press forward, and on the inside you're tricky to tie up with. So why not?
Yeah, exactly, and that's exactly what it is. It's exactly what he does. He just gets inside. He can throw punches from such ridiculous angles because he can come all the way around. But he still generates power when he's doing it because he just really whips him through. Yeah. And it's really cool. And he can take a punch as well. Like his fight Erickson Lubin, who's quite good. He's one of those fighters who's a bit confused about what fighter he should be because he's much more Lubin's skilled in the pocket. He knows what he's doing in the pocket, but his chin is really shit. So then he defaults to going on the outside. But he's not that good at being on the outside. So he keeps jumping between the two of them. And it was a good fight because basically, he'd come in, fight it out with Fundora on the inside, and then he'd drop out and he'd struggle there because Fundora, he doesn't like being on the outside, but he's 6'5", so it's fine. It's basically at one point Lubin went, okay, this isn't working for me, I'm really going to put all my effort in. I think it was the 6th round, and he hit Fundora really fucking hard, and Fundora kind of wobbled for a bit and got to the end of the round, and that was it for Lubin. Lubin hit him so hard he drained himself. and that was the end of the fight. The next round Fundora just came out, he'd recovered from being wobbled, he came out and he just stepped on the gas and flattened him, and Lubin had no answer. So it's if you're in that division, if you're 154 pounds and you're looking at, Lubin's he's a world level fighter. He's not like pound for pound, but he's a world level fighter, and he just you have to hit him with it was literally you could see him gather up all of his strength into a video game move and every ounce of strength into this last punch, and it just
had
kind
to
of
cook the punch first before
and it just kind of Fundora just kind of went, okay, that hurt me. I'm gonna recover for the next 30 seconds. And
does Fundora actually have any trouble making the weight, or?
He says no. He says he walks around at 160, which is not a high walk around weight for a 154 pounder.
That guy is all diesel annoyed up. I have no other way to describe him. Just look him up. The man's gigantic.
Yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. And when he's not fighting, he wears these. He looks like a nice young man. He has these glasses and just such a soft-spoken guy as well. And then he gets in the ring and it's this fucking unmovable tank. Yeah, this is the thing. You can't move him back. You'd expect someone like that who looks like that to at least be a bit fragile, and he's just not. So. It's going to be fun watching him going forward. It's a good division he's in, so 154 pounds. One of the fights coming up just fell apart. Tim Chu was supposed to be fighting Charlo, and I'm really hoping they call Fundora up to fight Chu instead. But I don't see it happening, but it's a good division. So yeah, that was that. And then we had Spence versus Ugas a couple of weeks later.
The man who cannot stop getting into car accidents, just fucking loves them.
Yeah. Anyway, assuming he's okay after that car crash. I was quite surprised because like my notes on the fight, like my podcast afterwards, this was probably the best performance from Spence that I've seen. It's hard to say because Ugas was never going to beat him, but there was a bit more lateral movement and that kind of thing from him, so that was good. But it's not going to go down in history as anything super relevant. But the main thing I remember from that card was Stanionis versus Bataev. It's not like a must-watch fight. Like if you've got a moment, give it a look, just so you know who Stanionis is, I guess. But Stanionis, he's also a welterweight. He's Lithuanian, I think, and he's in that position where it's a bit unfortunate because he hasn't got the crowd. Like he hasn't got any following, but he's really good, so no one wants to fight him. But for some reason, he is being ordered to fight Virgil Ortiz in, I think it's like April or March. So basically, I'd recommend if you want to see what's coming in. Basically, Stanionis is going to be a relevant fighter at welterweight for the next few years, I would suggest. And he had a good fight with Bataev. It was like a inside fight, pocket boxing performance. Both of them are really good. I'm not going. It's not one where you're going to come out being like fight of the year, but it's fun. Okay, I've already talked about my next talking point because it was Tyson Fury versus Dillian Whyte being the biggest crowd. So I won't talk about that.
Dillian Whyte, man.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So I've never seen a person outperform his own talent so much. Like he's clearly done something right in his career.
Yeah. It's always like the way that Dillian Whyte gets hyped up by the British crowd. It's psychotic. Just never seen that large of a following for a guy who is just. It just isn't what people are saying he is.
Yeah. He's entertaining, but he's not good. Yeah. And he's one of the least athletic people I've ever seen in my life. So I swear he moves like he's got injuries, like he's got a back injury. He can't move backwards. It's silly. In any case, it wasn't a very significant fight. Tyson Fury should be fighting better fighters. The most interesting thing of that card was when Nick Ball was fighting Tyson Fury's cousin, and I already knew Nick Ball, like I talked about him like a few minutes ago, so I already knew him coming in, but this was when people sort of noticed who he was, because he was fighting with Isaac Lowe, who's Tyson Fury's cousin, and it was supposed to be like Isaac Lowe's going to beat up this little guy and look really good, and it didn't happen. So that was fun. I think I'm going to move on to May now, and one of the things from this year was women's boxing became like a really big thing, because boxing's been a bit behind MMA. That's one place where, to the fury of some of our co-workers, Ryan, women's MMA is actually quite big.
Unfortunately, yes, it is.
Yeah.
And as a result, it has a lot of weirdness about it, but that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, and I mean, women's boxing, I think it's going to face some of the same issues because there's a few fighters at the top who are really good, but then like no depth whatsoever. But I'm trying to be like not negative about it because you can see like even like in the last 2-3 years, there's more depth now than there was 3 years ago. So the more they get paid and the more stuff there is, of these big events, the more it's going to build up, I think. I hope so anyway. And basically, Katie Taylor fought Amanda Serrano, which is probably the biggest women's fight of all time. It's not quite the fight that Katie Taylor made it out to be, because after the fight, I will forgive her for this because Adrenaline was talking, but she said, until now, the biggest fight from Madison Square Garden, what everyone talks about, has been Muhammad Ali versus I can't remember who it was. Was it Frazier? The Garden.
The Garden, I think it was Frazier. Yeah.
Yeah, and she said, but now they're going to be talking about Taylor versus Serrano. So no, they're not. But it was a good fight. It was a good, and they're both good. They're both pretty good boxers. You wouldn't compare them to the best of the men at the same weight, but they're good boxers, and it was fun. 2-minute rounds was bullshit, but yeah, it was slightly controversial because some people thought Serrano should have won, but it wasn't one of those where you're going to be like, it was a robbery. So yeah. And then you had Shakur Stevenson winning really boringly. Was this a fight? No, it was later on. Shakur Stevenson, I'll talk about it now so that I would, don't talk about it later. He fought twice this year, and the first one was a really good performance against, I should have written this down, very professional. He fought Oscar Valdez and sort of cemented himself as the best fighter at 130 pounds in April, and then in September he fought Robson Conceição, and he just didn't even try to make weight. He was like, "Fuck it, I don't want to make weight." He came in overweight, and obviously he won that as well. But it was just a bit like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to move up to 135 now," which is fair enough, but it's just complete disrespect to your opponent to just like, "Yeah, I'm moving up after this fight. I'm just going to do what I like." But he also proved that he's just really fucking good, because like the fight in April was against Oscar Valdez, who was sort of the other best fighter at the weight, and it was Level's performance. He just scored it basically. But Stevenson's not the most exciting fighter in the world. He's an outboxer, point fighter, but I think he gets a little bit too much stick now. I think people are remembering fights he had before, where it was just literally just jab, 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 jab. There was a bit more now. Like he's. I think he knows that he has to be more exciting. So he's giving it though.
Tries to do more than one punch.
Yeah, like he comes in, he throws a little combo and then escapes. It's fun to watch if you like the technical thing. He's never going to be Golovkin or whatever. But yeah, it's not the most exciting fight to ever happen, but I should mention it because Shakur Stevenson's going to be a big deal in the next few years. So, and then we had Bivol versus Canelo, which was fucking hilarious. Another one I got really badly wrong because before this fight I didn't like Bivol at all.
Yeah, same. Like Bivol really surprised me because he actually, I suppose it was a case of him fighting to the level of his opposition, or like winning like by acquiring a reasonable enough lead and then getting away with it. Just like a really safe performances. Like on the come up, he was a bit more exciting because there were knockouts, there were like more dominant decisions, and then after Barrera, I would say he would just get these academic victories. The way I would put it is like those were perfectly fine academic victories. Like he got the B, and he was like, okay, I'm fine with it. Just never really like stepped on it in any of those fights. And then against Alvarez, he just really comes out firing in all cylinders. Yeah.
No, my main thing going in was that I'd never really seen Bivol be really good in the pocket. No, he always seemed to, like, even when he was in the pocket occasionally, he didn't seem like he wanted to be there, and it was like he'd occasionally get clipped.
And the knockouts, like, he fought, the knockouts were always like him landing a crisp 1-2, never like a left hook or a tight uppercut or anything like that.
Yeah, so seeing him compete with Canelo, like not just compete, but like really dominate Canelo. He fought on the outside a lot, but he pushed him. He won by pushing Canelo off balance and beating him in the pocket. And okay, he's a bigger guy, but yeah, that just came out of nowhere for me. And there were people who had been telling me before, like, yeah, this might happen, but I was pleased because he turned out to be a likable dude.
Yeah, I saw the ways in which Bivol could prove tricky for Canelo, which is like just being large, long, and knowing how to be large and long, and not just being like one of those tall men that Canelo just does a good job of, moving around and knocking around. because when he tried to, Canelo is really good at enforcing his physicality, but Bivol also is an extremely physical fighter, so it didn't work.
Yeah, and like my other thing was Canelo's really good at fighting off his opponent's jab, and that just didn't work for him this time. Like,
I mean, Bivol just throws like so many different jabs, not just one jab.
Yeah,
it's always like it comes from different angle, has a different type of stink on it, has a different like type of timing to it. Sometimes he would just like jam his hand in your face and never stop jamming it.
Yeah,
like, dun, 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 dun. Just really interesting, really like. Fundamentally, I would say like Bivol really fights in a way that's in that archetype of like a Soviet outfighter that you got in amateur boxing like way back when. He's kind of a throwback in that respect.
Yeah, but he's like a really good version of it, because we've seen those guys. You know, those guys pop up like sort of all the time in boxing. They kind of come up and they look quite good, and then they kind of reach world level and they're all right, you know. They might win a title.
And then turns out they're a bit
just
stiff in the pocket, a bit stiff with the head movement, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and Bivol just looks really fucking good. Like he fought Zerdo later in the year, and I mean, I by that time I was like, if he shows up like he did against Canelo, Zerdo's got no chance, despite being fucking massive, because all Gilberto Ramirez, to give him his full name, can do is he throws quite nicely in the pocket. He throws nice combinations. But that's literally all he's good at. So I don't know if you'd watched him fight before or if you watched that fight at all.
No, I skipped that one, I think.
Yeah, it was exactly what you might have thought. Basically, Zerdo, he's a big guy, and when he gets going, he throws smooth combinations. But he can't. His footwork is shit. He keeps getting off balance. He's got no jab, and defensively, like he throws nice combinations, but he doesn't defend himself while he's doing it.
What do you think about Bivol versus Bitter Beef? This is better beef.
I think I'd pick Bivol at this point fairly. I mean, I wouldn't say comfortably because Beterbiev.
He's a tank, so
yeah, he hits too hard. But it's just like he's really good, Beterbiev, but he defensively he doesn't do much, and his footwork it gets him into a position where he needs to be against everyone he's fought so far, but it's not what you call technical.
Yeah,
he's just kind of walking about.
He likes these bum rushes and blitzes. Kind of like almost MMA-esque blitzes where he just goes like punch, and he just kind of like marches at you. It's really weird.
And I think like it works for him against the fighters he's fighting. But I think Bivol should have too much, like, you know, if you come at Bivol like that, he's just going to step out of your way. And we've seen Beterbiev is hurtable himself. Like he got sat on his ass by Cam Johnson, so he's hurtable. I would pick Bivol. It wouldn't be with certainty, but I think it's irrelevant because Anthony Yard is fighting Beterbiev in February.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ!
I'm making that one.
Beterbiev is like 37, and they're wasting all this time with fucking. Oh my god!
Yeah,
fucking boxing, man.
I mean, that fight should have happened before, but someone got injured or something. I do have to say, obviously, I am not going to pick Anthony Yard. You know, my official prediction isn't going to be Anthony Yard wins, but I do think he's got slightly more chance than most people think. Just because his main problem to date has been catching people up who are trying to get away from him. Like, that's when he looks bad, when he has to close distance. That just isn't going to be a problem in this fight. And it's like, okay, his defence probably isn't good enough to sit with Beterbiev in the pocket, but his hands are really fast. Like, his hand speed is much faster than Beterbiev. And like whether I wouldn't pick him to be good enough to get his hands home before he gets knocked out, but he might be. You know, like I say. If it's anyone who's been sat on his ass by Callum Johnson could potentially get knocked out by Anthony Yard. Like, probably not a very big chance, but it is there. So I will be, I'll be watching that fight.
Weirder things that happened.
Yeah, exactly. And I like Anthony Yard anyway, despite his coach.
Who's Anthony Yard's coach?
Tunde Ajayi. He's the guy who, for a long while, he claimed he didn't spar at all, and he declares himself the genius of boxing, and it's just fucking. He's David Brent, basically.
One of those coaches that tries to also become a star as a star coach as opposed to just a good coach.
Yeah, and I mean he's the guy who was yelling. He literally told Yard to gas himself out, chasing Kovalev for a knockout when they fought. But I will give him some credit. Anthony Yarde last year he got outboxed by Lyndon Arthur, who's like this British guy. He's basically jab and move type, outboxer. Not bad at it, but British level. And after that fight, Yarde, I think Yarde said, "Look, I need to change something." So Tunde got another guy in who's actually got boxing experience, James Cook. And they've clearly been working on some stuff because Yarde's footwork, he's never going to be really good at this, but his footwork's improved. He's worked on.
I mean, that's what counts.
Closing distance.
You don't have to become like the next anything in an area of your game. You just have to be decent at it to become just overall better.
Yeah, and basically he fought Lyndon Arthur again in, I think it was March this year. It may have been late last year, but it was completely that one little change of basically Yarde started moving as he jabbed instead of like throwing a jab and then kind of lumbering its opponent, and that little change turned the fight so completely that it went from a really obvious he got completely outpointed the first time, and then the second one he just fucked him up and knocked him out in 4 rounds. It was completely one-sided beating. So yeah, he's improving basically. He hasn't got that. It's too late to make him like elite, but he's I like Anthony Yarde, so that was fun. Where are we? Jamal Charlo fought Brian Castano. I can't really remember the fight, so it can't have been that good. But I like Charlo. Well, I can't say I like Charlo because he's a wanker. But
I mean, me neither.
He is
for the same reasons.
Yeah. But he is an oddly good rematch fighter. Like he keeps losing the first fight or drawing the first fight. In this case, he fought Castano last year, and they drew. And I think that was the one where Castano really should have got the victory. And they rematched, and Charlo just made the right changes and won. He did that with Tony Harrison before as well. He lost a slightly controversial decision to Tony Harrison in 2018, and then like a year later he came back and knocked him out. So however dumb he seems, he's doing something right in the in between rematches, and now he's undisputed at super welterweight at 154 pounds. And he was supposed to be fighting Tim Chu this January, but it hasn't happened. He's broke his hand in sparring. He broke his hand in two places in training, which is like, what the fuck are you doing?
How is he punching?
I mean,
what's he doing? Like, is he wailing at someone's hips? What is this?
Yeah. I just don't know. But whoops. But yeah, I mean, he's a weird fighter. He's got no sense of timing whatsoever, but his technique is quite good. So it's something I noticed. If you watch Charlo fights, he almost never lands when he's the first one to throw. Like almost always, his opponent has to land something on him first, and then he's got the range and timing to land back. It's almost embarrassing how bad he is at it. But he's still, despite that crippling flaw, he's managed. He's a good fighter. He's genuinely he's not one of these bullshit sort of rounding up belts of nothing opponents. He's won all the belts 154, so you've got to give him the respect for that. But I still don't like him. What have we got next? Noya in a way fought Nonito Donaire again. Knocked him out. Nonito Donaire retired. Yeah.
I mean, high time to retire, I'd say, for Donaire.
Yeah, I mean, fair's fair. Like his late career resurgence was, I was not expecting it at all. But fighting Inoue again was just a step too far. And Inoue just he had a very disappointing year. He fought Donaire again, and he fought Paul Butler in the biggest mismatch I've ever seen.
Just why? Like why is his time being wasted like this?
This was, to be fair, not his fault. He fought. It was for the belt. But Butler, that ridiculous sequence of events that led to Paul Butler having the last belt, the IBF belt. So in a way, kind of, he wanted to be undisputed before he moved on up. So he had to fight Paul Butler if he wanted to do that. But it was just, Butler's best days were 6 years ago, and in his best days, he wasn't a world level fighter. So fighting, pound for pound elite, one of the best boxers in the world, is just pointless. Yeah, that was but yeah. Inoue was Donaire. Just Inoue was too fast and hits too hard for an old man. So yeah, I'm not gonna talk about that very long. But Stephen Fulton. I know we had Haney versus Kambosos on the same day. The rematch. The rematch was later on. The first fight was Kambosos. Was Haney just being a bit too good for Kambosos? Kambosos won the belts. It was Kambosos won the undisputed belts by beating Teofimo Lopez. But it turns out he's not actually that good, and he couldn't get close to Haney. Kambosos got the flaw that he's an inside combination fighter who doesn't know how to close distance. So he was against some fighters that'll work. You can be like a really really budget version of someone like Juan Manuel Marquez. Is how I describe him. Where Marquez does know how to close distance, but his favourite thing to do is to get his opponents to come to him and then throw 5-6 punches before they get away. And that's kind of what Kambosos is trying to do. But against Devin Haney, it's just not going to work, is it? Haney has no interest in engaging with you if he doesn't have to. So in the rematch, because the first fight there wasn't a lot to talk about. Like it was, not as boring as some made it out to be, but it was just Haney boxing at distance and winning really comfortably. And I had a rematch later in the year, and Kambosos is planned, this big change in technique to make him better was to go southpaw. So,
what?
You don't know how to fight southpaw. You don't know how to do it. And then I can't even remember what I said, but he was just doing all sorts of bullshit, like just completely unplanned, like throwing, really weird punches, which works for some fighters, but you haven't learned how to do it properly. So
this is like, I don't know, this is like a WMMA tier type adjustment. Because literally, because that's what Amanda Nunes did against who was it?
Yeah.
Anyway, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah. But that worked for her against Pena, whereas it didn't work for Kambosos. And yeah, it was just loads of, instead of focusing on this is the problem with my game plan, I need to fix up my technique. It was just like loads of. He's the same fighter he always was. It's just there was loads of bullshit on top of occasionally throwing really weird punches and things. So I remember getting very annoyed about that. I can't remember exactly the details of it, but I remember getting very angry about it on my podcast. But yeah, on the day of the original one, back in May, we had Stephen Fulton against Danny Roman, and Stephen Fulton's kind of snuck up on me. I'm kind of assuming that you know who he is, but not fully aware.
Actually, I'm like completely unaware. I would say.
Okay, he's American. He is at super featherweight, super bantam. I think he's moving up to fight Brandon Figueroa again at 124,
so he
126, whatever it is.
Previously in November of last year.
Yeah, that was a really good fight actually. That was like a really nice inside fight, clinch fest, but like really high action. That's worth watching. Like Figueroa is the kind of guy who just doesn't stop. He just throws all the time. And then against Daniel Roman, I expected it to be another one because Roman's kind of weakness, he gets in there, but he's not so good going backwards. And I thought Fulton would look to do that, but instead he kind of just fought a wide ranging. Like he's a really well-rounded fighter. He does shitloads of different stuff. He's really good on the outside. He's really good on the inside. He knows how to clinch and push and all of that stuff. So he just put it all together. Doing what Roman didn't want him to do, in the times that Roman didn't want him to do it. Never let him settle. And he's impressing me because like in times gone by, he's really good at each individual phase, but he's got a little weakness. Like as he transitions, but he's getting better with it every time out. So against Roman, I thought, okay, if he does, like my prediction was that if he does try to switch in and out, then Roman might catch him, but it just didn't happen. Like it wasn't on the cards for him. So like Fulton is now good enough that my prediction is if he stays at super bantam and Inoue comes up, I might pick Fulton. in that fight because you know, Inoue is obviously like the big star, but he's coming up to, you know, I'm not convinced that he can knock Fulton out really easily. And in terms of like the overall skill set that Fulton has, he definitely has more skills like and in more different areas than you see from Inoue.
Yeah, and Dane,
you know,
Inoue kind of is starting. He's a ridiculous counterpuncher. Obviously, has decent footwork coming backwards and forwards, but it's not like he ever changes up. In those minute details, like change up the stink on he puts on his shots, change up the timing of his shots. It doesn't do that. Kind of works to the same tempo and the same rhythm every time.
Yeah, like he knows how to disguise his shots and things.
Yeah.
Like he knows, and so when he can draw his opponents on, it's fine. But we saw it against Butler. He took 11 rounds to knock Butler out because he just doesn't really know how to break an opponent down who's, you know, who's focusing on defending certain things. Like you saw it in the first Donaire fight, and that was much more understandable because Donaire's really good. But he didn't really have the tools to...
He also strikes me as really pressurable.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, because, I mean, obviously Donaire is really good. He's really, really good, so he was able to pressure, you know. But just kind of... Still think there's something there. Still think that if you push him backwards and just can throw off his timing, that there may be a route to victory there.
Yeah. Now, basically, I wouldn't put money on it. I mean, I don't put money on anything anyway. But it wouldn't be the exact same fight. But I could see a similar dynamic between Fulton and Inoue as we saw between Canelo and Bivol, where Fulton, you know, if he can really close up those gaps in the transitions, he's got it in him to just really, you know, push Inoue back. And then kind of dance back and make him come to him and punish him for that. And, you know, he's just really good, basically, Fulton. And, you know, he might end up not being that elite level because he hasn't quite proven, you know, Inoue is clearly really fucking good. And he might just have like, you know, the little gaps there. But that's one of the fights I really want to see next year. That's might be number one on the fights apart from Usyk versus Fury. I think Fulton versus Inoue is that one to make if they stay in their relevant divisions. And on the same day, I'm dropping another knockout in the chat. Joe Cordina, who came into this fight with a reputation for absolutely no power, and he was fighting Kenichi Ogawa, who has quite a lot of power. So the question was, how is Cordina going to handle this huge power disparity? And the answer was like this. If it's not region locked.
No, it's not, thankfully. Classic.
It's just a bit. What I enjoyed about that one is Joshua Boazzi is on commentary. He's the guy going, you know, Cordina has to find a way to make Ogawa respect him. And then when you see Cordina run to the ring ropes, the first guy to jump up to hug him is Boazzi, who's just completely forgotten that he's supposed to be commentating. Fucking yeah. There's like 10 seconds between him, his commentary, and hugging Cordina on the edge of the ring ropes. You know, yeah, that's what happens when you get people to commentate on their friends, I suppose.
Yeah. So basically, like, just fed him the jab to the body, and then came in with an overhand. Just a classic switch up.
So yeah, just really clean. It's just that no one thought Cordina had this kind of power. Like, he couldn't crack an egg, and suddenly he does this. So you know, fair's fair.
And timing and everything.
Yeah, that's the thing. And Cordina's always been like, he's had a really weird career because he came through, I think 6 years ago he turned pro, and he's just taken his time to get up to like sort of world level because he's like 31, I think, so he's not young, and he's got really clean technique. Like, he's a really pretty boxer, if you know what I'm saying. But he struggled. He was up division higher, and he really struggled to impose himself physically there. So it came down to super feather, to under 30 pounds, and he's doing better there. But even still, he hasn't really looked like someone who can, not even the power, just he doesn't really shove about or anything like that. It's all technique.
Yeah,
which is, it's going to be a problem for him at some point, and people thought it was going to be a problem for him here, but yeah, he used that against Ogara, I guess, because you could see Ogara was trying to push through, and got got caught.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where you just underestimate a guy because he hasn't really shown you anything that you should be threatened with, and then you just kind of walk into something.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see, because super featherweight is a good division, and it's a really fucking good division, and Cordina's got one of the belts, so we'll see how he handles it. See how he handles against someone like I'd quite like to see him fight Shavkat Rakimov, who he's not one of the dirtiest fighters you've ever seen, but he's got a history of like fighting guys and getting a bit outboxed, and they're just kind of combination of sheer bloody mindedness and some smart adjustments, making them kind of melt and fold and crack under the pressure.
A good combination of gritty and crafty, basically.
Yeah, and basically he's one of those rare guys where he gets really angry, really like all the time. He loses his temper all the time, but he doesn't lose his concentration when he does. So he just gets really fucking angry, and then just starts doing the right thing as a result of that, which is it's kind of weird.
It's a pretty unique trait to have, because usually, like when fighters get angry, they kind of lose their head, and so they become sloppy as a result.
Yeah, and with Rakimov, he fought Zelfa Barrett this year. He's like an English guy, pretty good, and this is basically exactly what he did. He was getting outboxed early on, and Rakimov's got a real problem with. He's pretty good when he's in close, but he has a weird punch selection, and he closes distance quite often with his face. So Barrett early on was just catching him and not sending him spinning, but eventually he started just getting inside Barrett's reach, and he does these Lomachenko-like moves on the inside, side steps and circles, and eventually Barrett's knee blew out trying to keep up with it, which was whoops, but Rakimov should be sort of on the world. He has got the world title as well. So you've got a nice bunch of fighters in there. Oscar Valder still, just decent bunch of guys. So I'm going to enjoy seeing Joe Cordina. I like watching Joe Cordina fight. He's not, he's never going to be pound for pound. He's just not athletic enough for that. But he's got a really good bunch of skills. He's clearly a really well schooled amateur who's kind of translated that into the pro game, without the physicality that you normally associate with translating it to the pro game. But nice combinations, nice, really. He's got a lovely jab, all of that stuff. So then we had in June. The only thing I've got in my notes for June is Beterbiev versus Joe Smith, which was just Beterbiev knocking Joe Smith out. It wasn't an interesting fight.
Wow, shocking outcome.
Yeah, Joe Smith isn't good. Oh yeah, and Bam versus Trisha wrong of his eye, but we already talked about that. So like I say, just watch everything Bam did this year. Jesse Rodriguez. I should note with Jesse Rodriguez, he fought his first two fights at Superfly, but he moved back down to flyweight, which I think was where his third fight was. He didn't really want to do it, but it was on the Canelo undercard, so his coach was like, "You've got to fight on the Canelo undercard." But he moved back down because his brother is Joshua Franco, who is at Superfly, and he's fighting Kazuto Yoka on New Year's Eve, so tomorrow, in Japan for the titles, and Jesse Rodriguez is basically like, my big brother's going to win all these titles, and it's that division's for him to win, and I'm going to win at flyweight. And it's like, I'm not sure, because Joshua Franco's okay, but he's not going to beat Estrada, or he might beat Yoka, I'm not sure, but he's not going to beat Estrada or any of those guys. So it's a bit of a shame. But flyweight's good as well. Like if Rodriguez can fight Sonny Edwards, that would be a cracking fight. So now moving on to July, and Opetaia versus Breedis, which was the one I mentioned at the start. which probably the most brutal fight of the year because, like I say, Breedis broke his jaw on both sides. Like basically, his jawbone was hanging off, held together only by his flesh, and he won. He was the winner. They beat the absolute fucking shit out of each other, and that was one where I was made to look a bit silly because Opataya, up until that point, he'd basically fought on the Australian regional scene, like literally, no one of any world level consequence whatsoever. So I was like, he just hasn't got the experience to beat Breedis. It's such a big level jump. It's because Breedis is like really fucking good.
Yeah,
everyone remembers it.
I mean, everyone should remember the Usyk fight at least.
Yeah.
And how he then went on to just, on a bit of a tear through the division. Not exactly massively dominant, but still lots of good performances.
Yeah, just basically beat everyone and put in front of him. And then Opataya's kind of a long, rangy fighter, but not like a point fighter. So he was basically the first half of the fight. Breedis couldn't get his time in, and Opataya was just basically, it was just a 1-2, but fucking constantly, constantly in his face with his jab and his 1-2 and his moving in and out. And he kind of wrecked Breedis' shit with it a bit, to be honest. And then in the second half of the fight, Breedis started to get inside and start to manhandle him in the clinch, and knocked his jaw off, but just didn't quite do enough to
jaw off its hinges, like literally.
Yeah,
the most literal sense of the word possible.
Yeah, he posted his X-ray, Opataya, and it's just literally just snapped. Fucking horrible. But they tried to do a post-fight interview with him, and it was basically just Opataya
going, Why?
So just let him go. Fucking let him get medical help. But that was a fun fight. It was too. It's not in my fight of the year list because it'll be in there somewhere, but it was too much a fight of two halves. It was like Opataya was dominant in the first half, and in the second half, Breedis kind of took over, but didn't make the comeback. So it didn't have that like ebb and flow that I usually like for my fight of the year. But it was a really good fight. Definitely worth watching. Weirdly, like I'm just looking at my notes now. I'm probably forgetting something. Like if anyone's listening and you're like, you've forgotten this really obvious thing, it's entirely possible. I had a weird year and not everything made it into my podcast in my notes, so I might have forgot something obvious. But Usyk versus Joshua in August.
We covered that
best remembered
extensively.
Yeah, we won't talk about it in depth. Just best remembered for Joshua's epic meltdown.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And one of the stories of the year was of the second half of the year was Usyk and Fury jawing at each other. I really hope that happens. But,
at some point, it has to happen, or at least it has to happen if there's anything left about fighting to care about.
Yeah, exactly. It was a really weird year because it was a really good year for boxing. Shitloads happened, but a lot of people seem to sort of get the impression that was a shit year.
Because the biggest fights didn't happen. But
because Spence versus Crawford fell apart and Usyk versus Fury.
In terms of consistency, it was a very good year. But in terms of the big fights that everyone talks about, it was kind of not exactly it.
Yeah, and it's kind of strange because we had 5. I think there were 3 or 4 undisputed fights. So fighters are fighting each other. Just the big stars are getting in each other's way. It's kind of infuriating. But in any case, I'm going to move on to September because we're not going to talk. We talked about Usyk versus Joshua. If you're interested in either of our thoughts on that, there's a whole podcast on it.
There's a podcast and there's also alternate commentary up on our Patreon. So check that out.
Yeah. Do that. So I'm going to move on to September, where Juan Francisco Estrada warmed up for Chocolatito by fighting a guy called Archie Cortez, who basically unknown Mexican, and it nearly turned into the curse of the unknown Mexican. Where you pick out a guy from Mexico who has a shiny record but no big names, and you're supposed to beat him up, and instead he fucks you up because Estrada found that fight really hard. And again, I'm not going to go into super depth about why, because I did a whole podcast explaining, but there were some really neat things because Estrada's main problem was he couldn't come in with his weaving head movement, because Cortez just had a really nice timing on a little uppercut that straightened him up as he came in. And I said this in my coverage of the Chocolatito fight versus Estrada, that Estrada almost borrowed that tactic from Cortez and used it on Chocolatito to straighten him up as he came in the first half of their fight. And just being straightened up as you approach really fucks up your whole defense.
Not just defense, but everything, because it interrupts the timing, interrupts the setups that you have for all your punches.
Yeah, so
really annoying.
Yeah, so basically, you can see the difference between Chocolatito and Estrada in the way they responded, because Chocolatito did the smart thing when they fought later on. He did the smart thing and kind of tried to time Estrada, bait him into the uppercut, and then follow up in behind. Whereas what Estrada did against Cortez was take up. Basically, what he did was he'd take up a infighting posture, curl up really tight while still really far out, and then just jump in at him, like literally just jump and get inside, shove him backwards, and work from there. And it was a fucking ridiculous thing to do. But Cortez had no answer. It's like, what the fuck? What are you doing here? Because that's the thing about Estrada. He's got all these shiny skills and like really cool, he does all these textbook lovely things, but every so often he just does something really fucking weird.
You have to balance out. You have to balance it all out. You have to do something dumb if you're too smart. Apparently, or at least that's what
it works.
Think.
Yeah. Things it worked. Like, it worked in this fight. It worked against Riskets. No, it didn't. Well, it kind of did. Against Riskets Sorungsai when he started.
The heavy hands guys always talk about this with MMA fighters, but it's almost like when a thing is working and working consistently, the fighters will start going like, oh, shit, this is working too well. Something's up. Yeah. I need to do something stupid now.
Yeah, but this is the thing with Estrada. He does it, but the stupid things work. Yeah, because he came into this fight, he clearly overlooked Cortez a bit. He's done that a lot, but his adjustments, his adjustments within fights, they're so weird that they shouldn't work, but they do. I'm just gonna throw myself at you, like basically almost rugby tackle you and shoulder check you, and it works. He. I don't know if you remember the first fight with Riskets Sorungsai. If I recall correctly, Sorungsai won. The 12th round. It was
the Sorungsai decisioned Estrada, I think.
Yeah. But in the final round, Estrada started doing like these really weird, crazy angles, and he'd kind of lean out and then throw a punch from a really weird, nonsensical angle, and he won the fight. He won the final round. And apparently it freaked out Sorungsai so hard that in the second fight, he famously decided to fight orthodox for like 8 rounds, even though he can't fight orthodox. And he was asked afterwards why, and he said, I thought I needed to give Estrada something else to look at, like I needed to give him a new look. And it's like Estrada doing that weird shit in the final round freaked him out so hard. That was like, in the next fight, it was like, if he does that again, I don't know what to do. I'm going to go orthodox, even though I don't know how.
This is basically like the smart version of like the MMA fighter doing something like completely nonsensical, except it works. It's actually smart.
Yeah, works except well, and it made the wrong side do something dumb. So but so Estrada versus Cortez, it ended up being insignificant, and then RG Cortez fought on the Canelo Zerdo fight later on. He fought on a Mujia fight card. I didn't see the fight, but I heard he looked really shit. So all my praise of Cortez being a smart fighter who might make himself a star on the back of this, so nah, it didn't happen.
Went down the drain.
Yeah, he just had kind of one good performance, and maybe he will come back and look at himself, but. The other thing in September was my actual fight of the year, which was light flyweight, and it was Shivanathi Nonchinga against Hector Flores, and it was fucking fantastic. It was Nonchinga's a South African fighter, and he's really lucky to be in this fight because he'd fought in April the year before, and he won a complete robbery. He basically melted under pressure from his opponent, and he won a complete robbery. And Hector Flores came into the fight being like a really good pressure fighter, like with really brutal body shots. Like he beat up Jay Harris in England with some really like fucking horrendous body shots. So my thinking coming in was that Nochingo's not going to he's going to try to fight at range. He's not going to be good enough, and he's going to fold because he really panicked. Like in his last fight, he basically lost his cool and freaked out and folded, and he won the robbery, but it wasn't a good performance. And in this fight, it was some of the best corner work I've seen all year, because he tried to fight at range initially, and it just didn't work. Like Flores is too good at pressure, so his corner, it's quite often, even in boxing and a lot in MMA, you hear corners go, "Why aren't you fighting at range? Why are you fighting him inside?" Right? But Flores's corner, Nonchingo's corner was like, "Okay, we want this to be at range, clearly not working, this is what you've got to do, and like keep calm, and this is what you've got to do." And they just talked him through it, round by round, like what you've got to do, little adjustments. And it was a constant back and forth of little, like tiny adjustments, but also constant brutality. Like, it's only like flyweight, but it was just constant action, back and forth, little adjustments, little changes.
The type of viciousness you frequently see at the very lowest weights, because they got infinite cardio.
Yeah, exactly. It was infinite cardio and infinite, but good technique, and they don't hit quite hard enough to knock each other out. But the thing is, you could see Nonchingo, like every so often, you could see him being like, "Oh shit, I don't want to be here." And then he'd get back to the corner, and his corner would be like, "Okay, chill out. You're doing right. You're doing the right thing," and just give him the exact right instructions. So it was a really good corner performance. But yeah, it was also just my fight of the year because they just didn't stop, and it was back and forth, and like I say, I'm not going to break the technique down, partly because I can't remember everything.
Also, too much shit has happened in that fight, presumably.
Yeah, but I did a podcast on it, so anyone who wants to can look it up. And yeah, that is going to be my fight of the year. I am going to do an article at some point detailing, my picks for fight and fighter and all of that shit. But this, I can spoiler alert. This is my fight of the year, and if you haven't seen it, like just basically everyone who hasn't seen it, make the time to see it because it was really fucking good. Yeah, not too much else to say about it. Just see it. That was in September, so we also got Golovkin versus Canelo, the third, which we've already talked about a bit. Yeah, we're not going to go into depth on that. Golovkin looked bad, Canelo looked bad. It was uninspiring and a bit depressing, to be honest. But, yeah.
I mean, at least Golovkin didn't look completely 100% done and got starched, so there's that, if you're a fan of Golovkin.
Yeah. Yeah, it was one of the first, 5 or 6 rounds, I was like, he did look like that. He looked like he was going to completely, just not get into the fight at all. But then Canelo somehow managed to gas against the fighter who wasn't doing anything. I was like, how? It's almost. I remember having these criticisms of Canelo back, before, like his footwork's, his footwork's always going to be a problem. Like he's always going to be a bit stumpy, and his cardio is always going to be an issue. Like he does fantastically well at managing it, but it's always going to be an issue. And then I kind of stopped saying that because he had these really good performances.
Is the thing.
Yeah.
Now it's back and forth for whatever reason.
And this year, he really got exposed on both those fronts. So.
I mean, normally I'm usually all against the typical myth of lifting weights will make you slow and bad at boxing. But Canelo does a lot of weight, a lot of powerlifting in his training camps, and I wonder if he just fell in love with it too much, and so just didn't do enough cardio for the fights. Yeah,
or if he just forgot because he's got so good at cardio management that he's kind of forgotten that he has to do it.
Yeah, could also be a reason. Yeah,
because he started he did it last year. It was a good performance, but he fought Caleb Plant, and he won by basically talking into big shots, really putting his effort to big shots. But in that fight, he had the time to pick when he was going to do it, and against Bivol and against Golovkin, it's like, even though Golovkin wasn't really doing anything, Canelo was still kind of just throwing huge punches at him from the off all the time. He didn't throw any smaller punches.
A result of his previous successes going to his head. Like,
Yeah.
I knocked out this huge man in Kovalev. Oh, I knocked out this guy. Bullied that other guy, and forgot that he actually like had very low volume performances against them, as opposed to just throwing huge shots. So the bullying came in every stage other than the actual punching, which is the difference.
Basically, I don't know. He should be good enough to get himself back together a bit, but I think fighters also see now where they have to aim to get him to fall apart. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes from here. We already talked about Shakur Stevenson, which I've got in my notes. I've got Maxi Hughes as cool. There's no big deal there. Maxi Hughes is a British fighter who I enjoy watching him, but just because he is completely unathletic. But he's never going to be world level, I don't think. But he's going to get a world title shot now because he's fought his way there. But he's fought. He used to keep losing at British level. Just at lightweight and at whatever, 130 pounds, and then he moved up to 135. And he used to keep losing to British level fighters, and then the last few years he just got himself together and made himself like a really good. Like he just does the little things of like feinting his way in and keeping himself safe, like with little movements, constant little movements. So that his athleticism doesn't really become a huge problem. And he fought Kid Galahad, who is he is a world champion now. He fought Kid Galahad, who is a world level fighter in theory. He's a bit of it. Well, he's a massive dickhead, and he has lost. Galahad lost to Kiko Martinez in a big upset because he was schooling Kiko Martinez like late last year, and he got knocked out in basically got cocky, and Martinez, who's about 100 years old, caught him with a big punch. And then knocked him out in the round later because he hadn't recovered. But he's fought Josh Warrington and he's fought a bunch of guys at world level, so he's really good. And Maxi Hughes just kind of stopped all of his like little skills. Like Galahad is kind of like a tricky infighting, shoving about and then varying the timing on all of his shots and all that kind of thing. And Maxi Hughes, who never used to do this is what I enjoy him, he never used to do this, just took it away from him with really good movement. And like I say, he's never going to be an internationally relevant fighter, but
he's decent enough. He's good at the fundamentals. He complements he makes up for the lack of athleticism decently.
And basically I just enjoy, perhaps because I watched MMA for too long, and it doesn't happen in MMA. I just enjoy watching a fighter going, okay, these are my weaknesses. This is what I do wrong.
This is what I do.
This is really what I have to work on. So anyway, that's I'm not gonna. That's if you enjoy that kind of story, watch a bit of Maxi Hughes. It's not it's not super exciting, but he's fun to watch, is what I'm saying here. Shields versus Marshall happened in October. That was supposed to happen in September. But then the Queen died, so they moved it. Oh my god! That was my that irritated me doubly because I was meant to. This was meant to be. I started waiting for the big. Started writing for Bloody Elbow, doing the boxing coverage, and this was meant to be my first fight for them. And I wrote the preview and I typed it up and I hit send, and literally 5 minutes later, the news was it's been postponed. So you wankers, absolute tossers.
Just to let the royal bootlickers to have the moment of silence, I guess, or whatever the fuck it was supposed to be.
Yeah, it was so silly because the football got postponed and this got postponed and everything else just carried on as normal. And
it's either everything gets shut down or nothing gets shut down. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Some consistency is nice.
Yeah, I mean, the football got ridiculous because they literally cancelled all the football, like not just the Premier League, like literally every game in the country got cancelled, and one team, Sunday League team, fucking non-professionals who were just going for kick about with their mates, got told they can't play. So one team live streamed on Twitter. They're like, well, our game's been cancelled, but we've turned up for our for a impromptu training session on a Sunday morning, and oh, we accidentally forgotten our training kits, so we're playing in our real kits. Oh, our opponents have turned up. And so they played the game, and then they got fucking fined for playing a game. So you dickheads. Anyway, that was... and the fight happened eventually in October. And this was quite, again, on the women's boxing thing. It was pretty cool because it was a card, top to bottom women's boxing. And it was pretty good. Like, it was, I can now not remember all the fights on it, but Shields versus Marshall was a headliner. And Michaela Meyer versus Alicia Baumgardner was the co-main, and both of those are like just really good fights, really well matched. Michaela Meyer got really annoyed. Alicia Baumgardner just kind of it was a split decision, but I can't remember what happened really. But it was just a cool back and forth again. I remember that, and it turned out into a split decision. But the main event was Claressa Shields,
Claressa the Quote Shields. The
Quote. She's actually. This is the thing. I have to give her the credit because in her early pro career, she was shit. She kind of just bull rushed everything, but like really leaning in face first and bull rushing and all of that stuff. And in this fight, she was fighting Savannah Marshall, who's trained by who's Tyson Fury's uncle, his old coach. You know, I mean, it's not Peter Fury, that's his dad. The other one. I know it's Peter Fury. John Fury's his dad, so it's Peter Fury. And so she has that kind of, Tyson Fury stance switching and all that kind of thing. And she's pretty good, Savannah Marshall. In previous fights, her footwork worked really well because she stance switches really quite cleanly most of the time, and she knows how to set up her power shots by taking a weird angle and throwing the power shot from there, and just kind of nice little details. But Claressa Shields basically took it away from her by just doing the little steps. And the thing with Savannah Marshall is she does the stance switching really clean, but it is like just step from one stance into the other.
Yeah, so
she didn't.
Not actually following up the stance switches, but like actual, effective offense is what you're saying.
No, she had the effective offense, but because she's taking basically once she starts switching, it's like a really big move, and if Shields sees it coming, she can move a little bit and take the sting off the attack. Yeah. And there were moments later on when she started, when Marshall started doing quite clever things. I compared her to what Anthony Joshua should have been doing, which is maybe a bit of a indictment on Anthony Joshua that I'm comparing her with a losing women's boxer. Saying he should have been watching this fight and seeing what he could have been doing, because basically she did start trying to do the little things like Shields would try to step around her and she'd just kind of stick her arm in the way and stop Shields moving, and then make her own little circular step. She'd start doing that, but she was having to invent it on the fly. She didn't have it in her tool bag already, so it wasn't enough to give her the win. But yeah, Shields just looked much cleaner than I've ever seen her, and really knew how to outbox and get in and out with the flashy combinations. And it's a fight. It's a good fight to watch for itself. But if you want hints about how Usyk would beat Tyson Fury, there's clues in that, because Shields doesn't fight like Usyk, obviously, but Fury does that similar thing to Shields, where his start switches really smoothly, but it is big step. He doesn't have the little subtle steps in between so much, which doesn't normally matter at heavyweight because neither does anyone else. But Usyk does a little bit, and you could see him taking advantage in a sort of a similar way. If just the little steps that take him a little bit further than Fury would be expecting him. But just in general, Shields versus Marshall. It's a fight worth watching. Now, if you like,
this is the prediction. Like the Lukasz uses women's boxing fights to predict Usyk versus Fury.
Yeah,
caught on film.
And I bet you weren't expecting that, lads. But this is the thing with women's boxing is it's kind of similar to women's MMA. the depth isn't there so much, but possibly more than women's MMA at this point. Just when the best fighters fight each other, it's just generally just pretty good.
Yeah.
Even though you get frustrated because it's only 2-minute rounds and 10 rounds for championship fights.
Why is it that boxing has rounds that's shorter rounds than MMA does? MMA just does normal rounds.
Because it's I don't know.
Sexism?
Sexism, basically. Yeah, it's basically women aren't strong enough. It's like, for fuck's sake, what are you talking about? They're fighting each other. It's fine. And yeah, it's frustrating for a few fighters because like Amanda Serrano in the fight we talked about earlier, when she was fighting Katie Taylor, she could have had a lot more success if she could have pushed the volume for another minute in each round. She had a bit more power than Taylor, but every time she got Taylor a little bit maybe buzzed, like she never seriously hurt her, but she never got the chance to follow up because the bell would ring. So it's that kind of thing.
It's really annoying.
In any case, I've been covering women's boxing quite a lot, like a few of my previews and reviews, and I can talk shit about it. You can talk shit about it, but I have been quite it's made such a huge step from where it was. Every so often, quite often, you do get a fight where you're like, okay, this established champion of 5 years is fighting some random nobody, and they're gonna fuck him up, and obviously that's what happens. But other times, they're having some genuinely good fights. So
that's all we can ask for, just gradual improvement.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
As long as it's getting better, it's fine. I'm fine with it.
Exactly. And then we move on to November. And November threw up a bit of a turn up for the books because Lomachenko fought Jermaine Ortiz. And that was a good fight, and it was a surprising one because Jermaine Ortiz really turned up with a brilliant game plan and made it really hard for Lomachenko. And it was a really good fight, and if you haven't seen it, you should. But it happened on the same week as Kenshiro Teraji versus Hirota Kyoguchi, which is like a big Japanese fight on a Tuesday morning, which I wasn't expecting to be able to watch, but then I got sick, so I did. And then it was such a good performance by Kenshiro, because he has to call himself Kenshiro because everyone likes is it One Punch Man?
No. that's
that's
Fist of the North Star.
Fist of the North Star. Yeah, thank you. I'm half a nerd apparently.
We create
One
the
Punch Man
night.
is completely different. Yeah, I mixed up my animes. Anyway, Kenshiro, his performance was so good and just so. It's so fucking cool that I went, okay, Lomachenko, you can wait. I'm talking about Kenshiro first. Basically going in, I guess. Basically going in, Kyoguchi, it was 50-50 for me, and Kyoguchi's like a well-rounded. He's an combination in-fighter, pressure fighter. Comes behind his jab, throws pretty classic, combination pressure fighter. And Kenshiro's he's got a really good jab. And he's a similar sort of fighter, and he's a bit more athletic. But my impression was he makes more mistakes coming into the fight, and he'd actually lost the fight at the end of the year before. He'd lost a complete shocker. Like he'd got himself into a completely needless war with a guy that shouldn't. It was a tune-up fight. And he lost, and then he fought him again, and he beat him, but he didn't look like super special in it to me. So I was like, okay, it's a 50-50 fight, and I might lean towards Kyoguchi. And Kenshiro came in, and he was so good. His footwork was so good. His jab, his jab was as good as I've seen it, and he already had one of the best jabs in boxing. So he had that. So just from there, Kyoguchi couldn't close distance on him. And then the footwork, which he hadn't shown before, like just constant circling, like little circular movement, and then stepping off to the side and throwing a punch from there. And any weaknesses he might still have in his guard and his defense in close just didn't come into play because Kyoguchi could do absolutely nothing with him. So it was a kind of performance that makes me consider putting Kenshiro on my pound for pound list. Because it was just so, complete level schooling of what should have been two world level fighters fighting each other on equal grounds. Mm. So if you haven't seen it, definitely
rising
recommend.
To the occasion, bringing the best to the. You know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and basically a guy, you know, taking a loss on board and thinking, okay, I can't fight quite like this, because he really did change his game quite a lot. Like, it was almost, he'd previously been kind of a pressure fighter, you know, hands up, get inside, work the body and the head. And in this one, he was almost had his hands down, but keeping the distance so much, and he's keeping his hands down to the guys where his punches were coming from. He's basically changed himself into a different sort of fighter, which is much more in keeping with the skill, with the talents that he's got. And just, you know, it's just really good to see, to be honest. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, see it, and listen to my podcast on it. And yeah, Lomachenko versus Jermaine Ortiz was also a really cool fight, because yeah, Ortiz was an unknown fighter. He'd fought, I think he'd fought Isaac. He'd fought someone before.
Doesn't have
he looked
a
okay.
Wikipedia page for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's that kind of fighter. He'd fought, he fought Jamel Herring, and he won that fight. So that's a decent win. But you know, it's nothing to think he's going to trouble Lomachenko. And in the end, you know, Lomachenko won fairly clear, but Ortiz just had a really good game plan, and he was really ready to circle with Lomachenko, which, you know, Lomachenko doesn't love when you do that.
Yeah, that's the typical, smart thing that you should do against Lomachenko, which is like there was this.
Yeah, I mean, it's really.
There's a really funny clip of Lomachenko at a seminar with at a boxing club with the youths.
Yeah.
And one of the teenagers there, just when Lomachenko pivots, he pivots with him, and Lomachenko goes, you little.
Yeah, that's basically what's happening here. Like, he'd just pivot with Lomachenko as Lomachenko tried to circle around him, and he, you know, he did. In the end, he didn't have enough of a bag of skills, and I think he also lost a bit of a cardio as the fight went on. He couldn't keep up, but it was just, you know, he came with the right game plan, and wasn't quite good enough, but it was a really good fight nonetheless. Then we've got Bivol versus Rodriguez, we already talked about. So I'm going to move on to Sonny Edwards, who you may have noticed on Twitter if you pay attention to Twitter at all. He's the mouthiest fighter on Twitter you will ever see. And he can be irritating because he's sometimes he's quite smart, but he's one of those guys who's always right, even when he's, you know. So he was a bit of an anti-vaxxer at one stage, because he's so used to telling people, you know, being the things he's told being wrong, that when he's being told that vaccines are good, he's like, no, that can't be right, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, and he's also just a complete. He's constantly getting into slanging matches with fans on Twitter, but when he gets in the ring, he's just really fucking good. He's another guy who doesn't look like a fighter. You might have seen the photos of him a few years back. He fought in pigtails.
Just a lad.
He fought in pigtails once. He lost a bet and fought a fight in pigtails. But yeah, he's just he's like kind of really he's British in the sense that he's got no power, but in everything else he's just a really un-British boxer, because he's just really. The British boxer stereotype is that they kind of fight clean, but they fight kind of one way.
Stiff.
The Anthony Joshua thing, and yeah, exactly. And Sonny Edwards is, he fights. He's not clean at all. His form is technical form, in kind of like a miniature Tyson Fury, in that sense.
All over the place, but still works.
Yeah, exactly. And he's an outboxer, but he's a volume outboxer. So he'll never throw one jab when three jabs will do. Like constantly moving. But this year he decided he's also going to be an in-fighter. So he fought 2 fights this year against Mohamed Rassim in April, and then a pretty good fight against Felix Alvarado in November. And Felix Alvarado, if you've not seen him before, he was at the division below flyweight. I fucking get the names confused when I'm looking on BoxRec, and it's just just the thing. But anyway, he stepped up to fight. So he's been the champion at the division below, and he stepped up. And Alvarado's basically insane. He just marches forward, throwing punches, incessantly, like 150 punches a round type fighter. So Sonny Edwards could have been wise to to fight him on the outside, which is what he normally does. But instead, he spent quite a lot of the fight in close, fighting in the pocket, and it was just like some people the judges gave it a lot closer than it was, and I can't blame them. This is one where I can't blame the judges, because if you're sitting behind Sonny Edwards, you can't see, you think those punches are landing, but really he caught almost everything on gloves and arms, and active guard inside, and then countering with slick little uppercuts. And it's just a really good fighter. He's probably the most skilled British fighter now, I would say. Despite being a complete wally. Yeah, and he's coached by Grant Smith, who's just an up and coming British coach who's got a bunch of guys in his stable. And yeah, he's become the fighter that no one wants to fight because he's a really good boxer, but he made some bad business decisions and he signed with Pro-Venom. So he can't go to the US as far as we know, and he's got no money in his pocket. So he's trying to get fights. But he wanted to fight Julio Cesar Martinez because Martinez beat his brother a few years ago, Charlie Edwards. Well, he beat him up, and then he got disqualified for knocking him. Basically, Charlie Edwards took a knee, and Martinez looked at him and went "fuck you" and smacked him right the head.
Jesus.
No, sorry, it was a body shot. But still, yeah. So he got that turned into a no contest, and then there was this big story for years about Sonny Edwards fighting him for revenge. And when it first got talked about, it was like, "Oh, Sonny Edwards is going to get flattened. Martinez is too powerful and too fast." But now when people talk about it, it's like, I'm so glad that didn't happen, because Edwards would just school him, yeah, he's just a really good fighter. Like, he's not going to get into wars, but if you like your, deep skill sets, yeah, Sonny Edwards is definitely one to be watching. Yeah, then you can irritate people on Twitter by talking about how good he is, because everyone hates him. So yeah. Where are we now? Prograis versus. Did you see Reggie Prograis versus Zepeda? I assume not.
No.
Because that was nice to see. Because I assume you remember. I think you watched Prograis versus Taylor.
I probably did.
Like 5 years ago. Yeah, and that was the last thing of any relevance that Prograis did. He had the most stupid career decisions. I think he fought once a year since then, and of no one of any relevance at all. He fought 3 times in 3 years, and they were all complete knockovers. And he came into the Zepeda fight, and Zepeda's pretty good. He's a sort of bit straight-lined, but like really clean puncher, really good at drawing. He keeps getting knockouts by drawing fighters on and catching them as they come in. He fought, I don't know if you remember, in 2020 he fought Ivan Balanchik.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, with a fight with 7 knockdowns. 7 knockdowns in 5 rounds.
Completely ridiculous.
Yeah, so he came into this fight. My thinking was that if Prograis is at his best, he should beat Zepeda, but he hasn't fought anyone for 4 years. I'm not sure he'll be at his best, but he turned out to be very at his best, and just completely schooled Zepeda. And a really cool performance. The thing about Prograis is he doesn't fight like anyone else. There's no similar fighters. He can outbox on the outside, but where he's really good is closing distance and getting in really close and being really stupidly aggressive, but keeping himself safe. It's the thing I talk about with him is his footwork is so good that he can lean out to really crazy angles when normally anyone else would be off balance and have no power, and he can still generate power. He'll be leaning completely over his left foot, like completely out of shape, and firstly his opponent can't catch him, and then secondly his opponent he can't defend the shot.
No one punches from those angles, so what the fuck's happening?
Yeah, exactly. And so I felt a bit smug about this one, because my prediction, I said if Prograis isn't at his best, it'll be trouble, but if he is at his best, the thing with Zepeda is he's one of those fighters you see sometimes where they have more trouble with the really crude fighters than they do with like people who work their way in. Because, like, that was the thing with Balanchik. Like, he's clearly a much better boxer than Balanchik, but Balanchik would just throw these ridiculous, stupid hooks, and Zepeda couldn't get back out of the way in time, and he got knocked down a few times because of it. And then he knocked out Balanchik for the same reason. But my thought was, Prograis can sort of recreate the same effect, but do it without exposing himself. Pretend to be crude, but actually be really skilled, and that's pretty much exactly what happened. It was just Prograis constantly fooling Zepeda into thinking he's going to jump in, and then doing it like a second later. And it's just it's a really cool performance. There was a few fights this year which they weren't good fights because they were too one-sided, but the performance was just really fucking cool. If you're a boxing fan,
I mean, that's kind of
and this was one of them.
Similar to how a lot of people talk about what's going to be the fight of the year for MMA this year, but you can't say Max Holloway versus Volkanovski because it's just Volkanovski beats the ever-loving shit out of Max Holloway. It's still like fucking insane. Yeah, performance of the year, sure, but not fight of the year. Yeah, and that was kind of this kind of thing. My performance of the year is kind of. I kind of have to give it to Bivol, don't I, for his performance of Canelo? Just but, the level of the opposition, the level at which the fight was held, and just the general level of skill that they brought to the table. Yeah, but Kenshiro versus Kyoguchi was, that was so cool with that. I'm tempted. I'm not going to, but I'm so tempted to give that. It's like a personal pick, but the official pick is different. Yeah, exactly. I'm good. Like, when I write my article, I'm definitely gonna, I'm gonna have to mention Kyoguchi. But Bivol has to be the fighter of the year and the performance of the year. It's too significant not to be. In any case. So Chocolatito. The final thing to talk about is Estrada versus Chocolatito the third, and again, that's not we're not going to go in depth because it's been done, and it was not 3 weeks ago. So did we talk about Teofimo Lopez versus Sandro Martin?
No, we didn't. See, I told you I'd forget something.
There we go. Happened in December.
And I covered that fight, so poor Teofimo Lopez. I mean, he won, but he didn't.
At what cost?
And he didn't win. It was a
regular.
It was one of those
Pyrrhic victory, like a hit to a reputation, also humiliated.
Yeah,
it's just the thing is justified with all the media bullshit.
Yeah, and the thing is even before the fight, it was like you normally don't talk about mental state, and you can read too much into how angry a fighter gets or how annoyed he looked in the way.
You can't exactly get into someone's head to exactly know what they're thinking. Just can't.
But with Prograis, it's like it's happened before, and it's such a big part of how he is that I said, he's going to get frustrated. Martin's going to drop it, going to catch him with check hooks. He's going to jab him a lot, and he's going to catch him with check hooks, and then he's going to get really angry, and that's going to come to the fight, and that's exactly what happened. It's just Lopez got really fumingly angry, and it's just a bit embarrassing, And then he apparently got broken up with live in front of in the world on TV cameras. Again, I can't speak for how his relationship is, but he was literally talking on the mic about how him and his girlfriend or his wife had gone through tough times, and as he was doing that, his wife was blanking him. It's like she refused to hand up the child into the ring, and then afterwards there was like some awkward situations as well in the back. So I talked about this, I think, on the podcast at the time. It's like at this point, it was so bad that my concern isn't can Teofimo Lopez get it together as a boxer. It's can Teofimo Lopez find a happy place in life. He looked absolutely miserable. It's just Sandro Martin,
state of affairs. Nothing's all right.
Exactly, and like Sandro Martin is, he's fine. He's he's slick and all of that. But Was that because I'm confusing Sandor Martin now with there was another fight the week before. Well, I can't remember who it was, but it was pretty much exactly the same, a Spanish guy. So it must have been I'm just going to check on BoxRec the ratings in Spain and see if I can remember who I'm talking about. But it was basically the exact same thing. It was an outboxing Spaniard fighting someone charging at him, and it turned into a bit of a one-sided brawling fight. But in one of them, the fighter broke his hand. The Spanish fighter broke his hand and fought with one hand for 8 rounds. But Sergio Garcia. Yeah, Sergio Garcia was fighting. No, that can't be it. For fuck's sake, what am I talking about? This is so unprofessional.
This is going somewhere. I promise.
Yeah, I think I might have to say. I can't. Oh yes, there we go. Samuel Carmona. Samuel Carmona was fighting Julio Cesar Martinez, who I've been denigrating. Martinez was the aggressive guy. Like, it was basically identical. Martinez was getting really frustrated and couldn't close distance, and Carmona was sliding back and popping him and making him look a bit silly. But Carmona broke his hand, and so he was fighting with one hand for most of it. So you could see giving it to Martinez, which he won in the end on a split decision. But the commentators were being really stupid with Cordina because they were like, "Oh, why isn't he punching?" It's because he can't fucking punch because he's broken his hand. But anyway, it was basically two consecutive weeks where really aggressive. Martinez is Mexican and Lopez is obviously
Spanish speaking. Just say Spanish speaking.
Yeah, let's leave it against. Yeah, let's leave it there. And Carmona and Martin are actual Spaniards. So basically identical fights, except one of them broke his hand and one of them didn't. It was weird. And two guys got humiliated, and no one wants to see them. I don't know. I want to see Lopez be as good as he can be, but he's not going to be when he stays with his dad.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a really sad case of a typical boxing dad. One of the worst in recent memory. Yeah. Just constantly holding the attention.
But this is the thing, because people compare Lopez's dad with Danny Garcia's dad. But the thing with Garcia, firstly, Danny Garcia likes his dad. His dad's America, but he likes his dad. But the thing with Angel Garcia is he takes the spotlight away from Danny Garcia. So Danny Garcia kind of just gets on with it behind the scenes. Whereas Lopez's dad is just throwing, he's hogging the attention, but then putting shitloads of pressure on Lopez and not helping him. So he's kind of cracking under the pressure. So, Garcia's a bad boxing dad in terms of being embarrassing and all of that. But he's doing, he's got Danny Garcia to good places. And that's not the case here. It's just sad. So yeah, let's finish on that happy note. There's a few loose bits that I want to talk about, which is we touched on it briefly, but the frustrations with Terence Crawford not fighting Errol Spence and all that bullshit, and who's to blame? Because they agreed to fight, they had a fight set, and then Crawford it wasn't signed, but Crawford kind of pulled out pretty late, and there's all this back and forth over who's at fault because Crawford claims that he was offered no guarantee. He was offered only a percentage of the takings, but he wasn't offered any guarantee, and he wasn't offered a look at the books. Mm. So basically, he was having to take on trust that they weren't cooking the books, and so he said no. And everyone's like, "Oh, it's his fault or it's someone else's fault. He thinks too much of himself." And yeah,
I mean, come on, if that was the case, like, you'd have to be really, really dumb to agree to that kind of deal.
Yeah, exactly. This is the thing. Crawford probably does think. Well, I mean, he thinks too much of himself, but people keep giving him the money, so I mean, and they lose money on him.
Well, first of all, he does think highly of himself, but also he's one of the best talents that we have in boxing today. So
I mean, his career has been so disappointing since he moved up to a welterweight. But
not fighting to the level he should be fighting at, and just not getting the opponents.
Yeah. And people are telling me, "Oh, Avanesian's a good opponent for him." It's like, no, he's not. So he's a good fighter, Avanesian, but he's never been in with anyone like Crawford, and it went exactly like how I thought it was going to. Crawford always takes a little while to get going, and then he always knocks his opponent out. So, yeah, he's probably the best finisher in the sport, but
he's really controlled finisher. That's how I would put it, in the sense that
exactly.
It's always like, it's always the shot that makes sense. It's always the shot that has been set up, like way in advance.
Exactly. Yeah, and he's one of the rare fighters who will quite happily, he'll pretend to be bad in order to coach his opponent into making mistakes, which you don't really see very often. Like, he'll make deliberate, like, there's been a couple of fights, I can't remember which ones off the top of my head, but he'll pull
against Porter, he's given him quite a lot to work with, and I guess basically like almost against every opponent he did that.
Yeah. Like sometimes he'll just pull his punches. Like he would just won't. I mean, this is not that uncommon, but the way how controlled he is with it, he'll spend 4 rounds not hitting his opponent as hard as he can, so that they think they can take it, and then he'll hit them as hard as he can, and they fall over because they're not.
The big difference is not that he just throws throwaway shots. Like he does look like he's hitting the opponent hard. It's just that's not as hard as he could hit them, and when he actually puts his weight on it, so it's always like something horrendous.
Yeah, lights out. Yeah, no, he's really. I so hope he fights Spence, because like he's better than Spence technically. Like I think there's no real argument. He's a better technical fighter than Spence, but Spence is just good enough and just big enough that
it's compelling. Yeah. It's very compelling, but it's just one of those cursed
it's
fights.
Also, a little bit past its sell by date by now, but what can you do? Anyway, the other thing, I kind of wanted to wind up the conversation by highlighting a couple of I sprinkled some in throughout, but a couple of fighters I thought were cool throughout the year. There's a bit of a British slant to this because that's where I am. Technically I'm in Germany, but you know what I mean. There's the first one was there's a few young fighters coming through, making real. Starting to make waves a bit, and they're sort of before the level where anyone but like real hardcore boxing heads would have noticed. So you know about Keyshawn Davis and all of that kind of thing. I assume you've.
I've heard of them, so that means they're up and coming and everything.
Yeah, so Keyshawn Davis is a silver medalist at the Olympics. He must be infuriated because he kept losing. He's a brilliant amateur, and he kept losing to Andy Cruz. Yeah. So he turned pro. And he's thinking, okay, I'm not going to have to see Andy Cruz again. He's Cuban. He's not allowed to turn pro.
And then Andy Cruz
is coming up in weight.
It's a defect.
Yeah, defect. Yeah, exactly. But so Keyshawn Davis is doing well, and he fought on a few cards. There were a couple of cards basically where I think it's Showtime, where they just put all of their promising fighters on one card. So one I wanted to kind of highlight was a guy called Tiger Johnson. His name's not really Tiger. His name is Delonte, I think. If you give me a second, I will load up the event, and then I can tell you. Delonte Johnson, and he's like not as hyped as some of the others. And if you look at his boxwork photo, he's got a pink headband and just looks really very 80s. But he's really cool because he's a volume out boxer, which is I enjoy that kind of fighter. I like my Estrada and that kind of thing. But he just fights. He's got this really clean way of punching as he moves out, and he's he's completely on the prospect level. I have no idea if he's really going to be world level, but he's a guy I kind of highlight to you and the listeners, just to watch out for. If you see his name on a card list, if you're going to be there 20 minutes earlier to watch him fight, it's worth checking out. See some of his fights on YouTube. Then you had an English fighter that I am possibly feel way too early on the hype train for, but Sky are on the hype train for him too. So there's an Adam Azim, who they're so hyped for him that they had him fight on a Sunday as a headliner in between the World Cup games a few weeks ago. So they're clearly going like, okay, he's going to be something quite special. Yeah, that means
they're putting quite a bit of stock on that guy's, growth.
Yeah, and what he is he's what division he's fighting? Super lightweight. So he's fighting at £140. So it's quite busy. There's a lot going on for him there, and he's really fucking fast and really powerful. And so it's kind of hard. He keeps knocking opponents out up in the first, in the first 2 rounds. But what I like about him is he's got this athleticism, and you can clearly see he's clearly inspired a bit by Nazim Hamed, and he is. You can see he's I think he's Pakistani, and he's definitely South Asian, and he's coming from that community. Nazim Hamed was a big inspiration, and Amir Khan is a big inspiration to him as well. But he doesn't fight like Amir Khan because he's not an idiot. No, because he's really powerful, and he fights he kind of sets up one punch at a time, but he's clever with it. But what I like about him as well is even when he's fighting no hopers that he should be beating, because this is what you do in Britain at this stage. You can see the defensive moves that he's already making, and you can see he's doing things cleverer to set his punches up than he really needs to be doing. He throws really weird shots, like really wild uppercuts, step around uppercuts and things like that. But he sets them up properly, even though he probably doesn't have to, and that just kind of makes me think, okay, he's got something there. He's cool. He's got boxing brain as well as just being really athletic and knowing how to punch. And so I'm kind of interested to see. And he's already been talked about as a world level fighter, even though he's clearly not yet. But I do think the level he's at, like the guy he fought last time, Ryland Charlton, he was out of his league, but he has fought British level fighters and been competitive. And he got completely blown out by Adam Azim. So I think Adam Azim needs to move on to British level, which would be pretty early for a big jump for a guy where he is. But basically, he's a guy to watch out for if you like your exciting fighters. The other guy I want to talk about, the 2 guys I want to talk about, also British. One I think you would enjoy is Dan Aziz. Who I've mentioned on Twitter a few times. He's 31, so he's not prospect, but he's kind of broken through this year. He's one of those guys, you sometimes, despite all the blanket coverage of everything, you still get guys who just didn't get their shot, right? They have the talent, but they didn't get the chance to prove it. And Dan Aziz has been that guy. And then at the end of the last year, he got called in to fight Jose Burton, who is Tyson Fury's other cousin, because apparently beating up Tyson Fury's cousins is a way to...
It's just the dumb thing these days, apparently.
Yeah, so he beat him up, and then this year he's fought 3 times, and he's won the British light heavyweight title. He beat up Reece Cartwright, who you might have heard of, Jack and Peters, who, and then he's beat up Rocky Fielding, who you may remember because he's fought at world level quite a few times. And he's just, the thing with Aziz is he's a pressure fighter who does just really cool shit on the inside. Like at one point against Jack and Peters, he was doing cross-arm guard to stop an uppercut. Like he was just bringing his hands across, and Peters was trying to uppercut him, and you're just hitting the cross of his arms. Just little details like that. Like he clearly studies the old school, the really old fighters, and he's not going to be elite world level pound for pound. He's too old for that.
Interesting. He's one of those.
Yeah, but he's 33 years old, and he's just he's fun to watch, and he's one of those fighters. He cranks the pressure slowly. Like all of his opponents have sort of been competitive early, and then fallen apart as the fight goes on because they just can't handle the constant pressure and the constant changes. Yeah, it's just a really fun fight to watch. Yeah, I'd just basically pick out one of his fights and give it a watch if you have a moment. If you ever have a moment, and you'll enjoy it. And yeah, the last guy I'm going to mention, just to round it off on a weird note, is Fabian Wardley, because he's a British heavyweight. He's now the British heavyweight champion, and he's a guy who got discovered by Dillian Whyte. So basically, what happened is he was a white collar fighter. which I don't know if that's known. Is that a thing internationally? White collar boxing. This is where businessmen pay to fight professional fights. Not semi-professional, not officially, but with professional rules for like 3 rounds. And Fabio Wardley did this like 3 times, and he decided, okay, I like this more than being a businessman, so I'm going to be a boxer now. and you know, he turned pro, and he's quite flashy, and he's really athletic and really fast. But he doesn't look, you know, he makes all the errors you could expect from someone who turned, you know, he started boxing at 23. You know, his chin's in the air and all of that. And every fight he's had, he comes in and he looks really ropey, and then his opponent hits him on the chin, and he goes, "Okay, fuck you," and he just knocks him out. so he's fighting Nathan Gorman, who's proven, you know, he's proven not to be world level, but he had a good amateur career, and he fought Daniel Dubois and got knocked out. But other than that, he's good, you know, decent boxer. But he fought Fabio Wardley, and the first round, he's, you know, boxing the skin off him. Then he wobbles him really badly, and yeah, Fabio Wardley goes, yeah, fuck you, and hits him really hard, and Gorman just folded under the pressure, and now you've got a guy who turned boxing. He turned pro at, I think it was 23. No, he started boxing, I think, at 23. And he's now 28. So, and he's a British champion. He's going to be in the, you know, potentially in the ring with you know, Joe Joyce or Daniel Dubois. So that's like, yeah, heavyweight boxing is just so fucking weird.
I mean, boxing is like hard to call for at the best of times, and like, yeah, boxing at least is somewhat more consistent than MMA, because there's just fewer things you have to account for, but still it follows the same mold.
Yeah, exactly. This is the thing with Wardley and Gorman, is that Gorman doesn't like getting hit in the face, and Wardley apparently quite enjoys this. So, you know, it's a good trait to have, being a boxer. Just like waking up every time you get hit in the face,
having that spite.
Yeah, exactly. In any case, that seems to be my roundup for the year. I don't know. Have you got any? Have I missed anything other really obvious? Or did you want to talk about anything?
I mean, like, if my entire purpose for this one was to just remind you of the really, really casual fights that everyone knows of, I think we just hadn't mentioned them all.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay. Yeah. You know, I think I covered everything. If I forgot anything really obvious, I apologise. But I think I covered a good mix of the obvious stuff and some little, you know. As long as I get you to watch Nonshinga versus Hector Flores, I think I've done my job.
You may have sold me on a bunch of those performances and fights. So, like, my mission as a soundboard has been fulfilled. Like, just very interesting experience to just sit through a podcast and just not talk. Really, like, just breaking the mold here.
Yeah, what you not speaking? Conor Rubish, he's not going to listen to this, because I don't think he listened to my podcast. But if he did, he's going to be sitting there going, "What happened?" Any case, yeah. Well, I hope you do enjoy any of the fights you decide to catch up on, and
thank you for the recommendations.
Thank you for joining me. Anything we need to say before we close? Before I do the wrap up?
Not really. I mean, we have like a bunch of announcements in store. Like soon we're going to start launching we're going to launch the commissions thing that's on Ko-fi, because I just figured, like, with the way we get requests, we get tons of requests to make an article, to record a podcast, to record an alternate commentary, yada yada yada. It would make sense to, you know, have some kind of like monetary motivation to actually do so, because
that's fair. So we're going to be launching a commissions thing. Look out for that. I think you're still still raising money.
Yeah,
right?
I'm still raising money.
Might as well take
currently, like, in We finished second stage, I would say. We've got enough money to cover the legal expenses, but we don't have enough money for the actual practical step of getting there. So that's going to be very expensive. So yeah, just check out Iggy TFS at coffee.com and help me finally, not worry about having to return to Russia and fight in a war that I don't support.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you have any, basically if you can, any help would be greatly appreciated.
If 100 people band together and throw me $10, that's already 1,000. So, I mean, basically 100 people, not 10 people, because if 10 people band together, that's going to be just 100.
Yeah. So basically, tell your friends,
tell everyone,
tell your friends to give Iggy money.
We're really close. I have to add, we're genuinely really close. Like, haven't felt this good or hopeful in quite a while now, as you might imagine. So,
yeah. I mean, it's been a fucking hell of a year. I've been complaining about my shit, but for you,
if you thought MMA was bad, I mean, at least it just puts things into perspective. Put things into perspective for me, because I wasn't as discouraged by MMA being bad as some other people and stuff, because I had other things to worry about.
Yeah, actual shit to deal with. Yeah. All right, and I'm gonna. Yeah, as far as my announcements go, I usually talk about what's going to be happening next weekend, but there isn't. Next weekend is New Year's Eve. There is a fight happening, or should be. Joshua Franco versus Kazuto Yoka. But it is not being broadcast anywhere out of Japan.
Jesus, of course it is. So, of course. If it's in Japan, it's never just... They never show it.
Yeah, they flat out refuse. Well, I managed to watch some of Inoue's and the Kenshiro performance, but they've apparently flat out refused. Like, they do have the Japanese services where you can watch along, but it's...
just try and find a stream, is basically what you're saying.
I mean... It's on New Year's. It's going to be on New Year's Eve, so I think that's New Year's. It might be New Year's Eve morning. I can't remember which way the times go. Yeah. Anyway, it's going to be a weird time, but I'm going to try to find it afterwards.
Before I forget, there's a couple of announcements regarding content, which is we're going to be releasing the second edition of our Patreon Q&A podcast pretty soon, where we answer questions from our subscribers. Lots of them were very interesting and launched like very fascinating discussions. So I hope stay tuned for that. And also, there's going to be another sort of like a party podcast that's going to be Patreon exclusive. It's just me, Ed, Fenio, and Sriram just sort of vibing, just talking about all sorts of stuff that's happened this year in MMA and kind of like complaining about the things that annoyed us the most. And I think next year the Forbidden Technique guys are going to do another year in review that is similar to this one, except that they're not just going to cover the UFC because they watched everything. So they're going to talk about things maybe beyond the UFC that could be interesting that you should catch up on. So stay tuned for that. It
is a thought I've been having, and it's not relevant to this podcast, so I'm not going to go in depth, but it's like MMA fans should watch more non-UFC stuff.
Yeah, just a suggestion.
Even I mean, I've been complaining all year. I've just been watching Cage Warriors and enjoying the hell out of that. So just watch, just grab a random regional promotion and watch that.
If there's fun. I don't know, if there's a fight night coming up and you look at the roster of the people that's going to be competing at that fight night, go fucking hell, what is this shit? Just tune in to watch something else. You don't have to watch the fight night.
Exactly. Fight night. So UFC are not the only MMA promotion.
Watch some boxing for a change, maybe.
Yeah, just do that. Watch some boxing and then listen to me. This is the thing. Boxing has had a really good year, so I have literally been sitting here just going, you poor sods, covering MMA, having to talk about all this bullshit, and I've just been week after week of, there has been a lot of bullshit because it's still boxing, but it's been the best year for quite a long while.
The fights that were supposed to be fun turned out to be fun, so that's good enough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we had a few shocks, and the downfall of Canelo, which was. So yeah, okay. I will. I may not have a podcast. I mean, I don't know exactly when this is going to come out, so we'll see. But I may not have a podcast covering Ayoka versus Franco, which I should note may already have happened by the time this comes out, but because it's tomorrow. But I may not have a podcast covering that because I'm travelling next week. But if not, I'll see you for the fights. Is what I'm saying here. Follow me on Twitter. Follow Iggy on Twitter. If you throw out your handle.
Yeah, I've been banned 5 times this year alone, but my most recent account is 05. What's the? It's called _ fucking English. 05 Salamander, which is a really elaborate NATO rank joke, which you will figure it out later.
I was wondering. Okay, and I'm at Crafty Boxing, which is a lot simpler. And follow the fight site and join our Patreon. Which is I kind of assume that everyone who listened to this podcast, who's listened to it 2.5 hours of me talking, is already on our Patreon. But if you're not, join our Patreon. Yeah. And then I'll see you next year, I guess. Possibly this year.
Yeah, happy holidays, everyone. 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 Happy holidays, everyone.